Good evening.
Hello. Hello and welcome to the standing committee meetings of Monday, April 3rd, 2023. I'd like to thank Councilmember Dave Cedar for handing out candy before the meeting.
Glad to do it.
We're going to start with Community Development Committee, and we're going to talk about the presentation of Low-Mo May, and we have a special guest with from the ISU Extension Urban Agricultural Specialist, Stephen Eilers. We'd like to welcome you up. Oh, first we're going to have the mayor.
Hi, good evening, Mr. Chair and Community Development Committee. I asked to have this presentation brought forward, and I'm very glad to have Mr. Eilers here with us. I just wanted to give a brief introduction to it. We had No Mo May last year. It was our first time trying that out, and we, as you heard from residents and other folks, stakeholders in the area, there were some goods to it and some challenges to it as well. And so for this year, I brought forward a proclamation that will be on the regular agenda tonight for a Low-Mo May, which is slightly different than what we had this past year. And Mr. Eilers will present on what that difference is and what the focus would be for this effort. There would be, if the council would approve the proclamation during the regular meeting tonight, there would be no ordinance change required. Or a moratorium or not enforcing something like we did last year. So it would just be a community initiative without a need for government engagement or enforcement. But I think it's very important to issue the proclamation and to have the presentation and the information out just so the public realizes we're not abandoning the concept of pollinator protection, but we're just looking to take a different approach at it. And I'm grateful that you'll hear tonight what that entails. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Mr. Eilers from the ISU Extension Service.
Thank you. Welcome, Mr. Eilers.
Thank you. Okay, let's see here. Okay, again, start with the disclaimer that Iowa State Extension and Outreach is not for or against. We want to present people information so they can make decisions, best decisions they can. I know this can be very divisive. People are either very against it or very for it, so we want to tell the people the why and the hows in this brief presentation. So, a lot of upsides of No Mo May. Obviously, you know, the goal is for pollinators, is to feed the pollinators. When the bees come out of the ground after a long winter, they're hungry, they're groggy, they need something to eat. We think of bees as honeybees, but it's really not just about bumblebees and honeybees. It's native bees that are coming out of the ground. So when they come out, there's very few food sources at this time of the year in Iowa. Late in the summer, there's lots. At this time, there's not a lot. So early spring pollinators, again, they're waking up, they're a little groggy, they're very hungry, limited access to food and water. Having a No Mo May or a partial No Mo May can increase your bees 5 times in your yard, which are good. And these are not, you know, bees are not here to hurt you. Bees are here to help you. If you have kids, if you have dogs, you're going to be fine. These are the little benign bees that are not going to do you any harm unless you provoke them. Leaving dandelions, clover, and creeping Charlie, and violets can provide the food for the pollinators and many others that are looking for food for the sources that are not available. So those very few simple things, dandelions, violets, these are not things you have to buy, these things that naturally occur in most of our yards. Again, when we think of bees, we think of hives, but there are 4,000 native species and 70% of them are nesting in the ground. So these little creatures are not hanging around in beehives or the fancy things you see on TV. They've buried themselves into the ground for the winter. They're in the stems of plants that have been maintained. They're in trees. They've been here. These bees have not gone anywhere for the winter. They've just been asleep and waiting for nature to wake them up. So there are downsides, obviously, to No Mo May. And cities have weed ordinances as they need to reduce noxious weeds, manage pest problems like mice and rats, prevent dangerous property conditions, minimize allergens, and it's getting to be that season, and maintain the aesthetics and property values, which, you know, anybody who owns a home would agree with most of those. Now, please note, and this is one thing that a lot of people don't realize, if you spray your lawn, so if you sprayed your lawn all last summer, letting your lawn grow in May is probably not going to be a big thing. It's only good if you have left the dandelions, the clover, the violets. Otherwise, all you're going to get is long grass and no food for the bees. So it's not for everybody. So there are alternatives. Mow less May, maybe only 2 times. And this, of course, depends on the weather. We've had early springs and late springs, warm and cold springs, so it all depends how it grows. You can mow later, maybe you wait until the 15th of the month. Mow higher, 3.5 to 4 inches, which mowing high actually is a very good thing, especially in the spring. It's going to be a lot easier because the grass tends to be very, very dense anyway and very hard to get through. You can create a no-mow patch or area, which I'll cover. You can create a pollinator-friendly area, and you can cut down on using lawn chemicals. A lot of those things, just cutting down on chemicals or reducing your chemical use will actually have a big impact. So creating a no-mow patch or area, as you see in the picture, can be very simple. It can be leave a narrow strip along a fence, create a 3x5 front yard patch somewhere on your property, add a fence around that little area, and it's temporary. People sometimes think it's I'm never going to get to mow again, or it's always going to look bad all summer. It's really just for the month of May. June 1st, you can go back and do what you want to do. And then share it on social media. There's a lot, if you put up a "Pardon the weeds, we're feeding the bees" sign and take some pictures and put it on your Facebook, I think you'll see a lot more people will be very in favor of that. There is a lot of public acclaim that comes. So again, even if you are a person who likes to mow and likes the lawn a certain way, a very simple area. So maybe it's that 3x5 patch, or maybe it's an area along the fence that you mow up to that, but leave a strip of a couple feet along your whole fence line. Maybe it's an area beside the garage or behind the garage that most people don't see. Maybe it's an area that's a little bit less visible to the public, and your front yard can still look great, but you leave a little in May, leave it out. You can create a pollinator-friendly area. And if you have an area that you're leaving with the clover, with weeds, if you will, that's a great place to put your annual and your perennial flowers. Now, those aren't going to be blooming until summer, way after the first initial need. But again, you're always keeping that area kind of natural. So as the flowers grow, the weeds will kind of become shorter. By comparison, leaving leaves in the fall and leaving your stalks on your perennials and annuals, that gives a place for the bees to go. We don't need to rake and tag and bag all of our leaves. We don't need to take them all to a landfill. Once you get them off your sidewalks and your driveway for slipperiness, you can actually leave your leaves. As we always say, who mows or who rakes the leaves in a forest? Nobody. They just naturally become part of nature again, or as they're intended to. Again, grow a mix of annuals and perennials along a fence line and create a bee bath. Doesn't need to have sugar in it. It's basically just a very shallow pan or a terracotta pot with some marbles or stones in it with some water, because the bees also need to drink when they are coming out of hibernation along with their eating. That's it. That's the short presentation, and now I guess I take questions.
All right. Thank you, first of all, for coming and presenting us with some options to try to balance. So I'll open it up to council first. Anyone from council have any questions? No question. Yes, sir. Councilmember Schultz.
Well, I'd say you were correct when you said that this can be kind of a very highly debated neighbor against neighbor, and we don't want to create that. We certainly want to be nature friendly, though. Also, you were saying that, I would have been researching some flowers to have in the, instead of doing the no mow, and you're just informed us that that doesn't really help until a little later in the summer. Correct. But the leaving the leaves, that's going to help. People that don't want to participate in first off the no mow, but the second, I have a question on low mow. Is there something else we can do if people do plan to start mowing? First off, I think 3.5 inches is kind of the best height overall. 3 to 3.5 is always the best. But anything else that we can do to help our pollinator friends?
It can be as simple as the less chemicals, the leaves and the stems that you leave are going to be good for them in the winter. The no-mow May really takes care of that spring feeding. In the summer, that's when you get your flowers in. Take a little bit of your lawn, create some flower beds that have flowers that'll grow and be useful to them in the summer and into the fall. There's sedum. There's a lot of really lovely plants that bloom all the way through the first frost that the bees are going to be eating from, and they will take that into their hibernation when they go back and burrow under the ground or under the leaves. So there's really things we can do all year around to help the bees. The best thing is less chemicals as needed. Again, leaving a small area. If you don't want to devote your whole lawn, or if you can't devote your whole lawn, leave an area that is by a fence, that is behind the garage, that is a restricted area. You mow around it and you put up a sign. It can be that simple. And then June 1st, mow it.
Thank you.
All right. Other questions? Yes, Councilmember DeBer.
I think like in the memo to this, it talked about that the downside of the experiment was significant. And I was a little confused on your slide where you're promoting a front yard patch. It seems like, I agree, a 3x5 and would be more than needed. It seems like it should be only the rear yard and not the front yard. But why the sign?
A sign is to tell neighbors that it's on purpose. So you put up a sign that says, "Pardon the weeds, we're feeding the bees." That way they know, I just didn't forget to mow it. It's purposeful. And mowing an area around it tells people that that area is being grown on purpose and not forgotten.
It's just if we did it in the backyard, they obviously wouldn't need a sign then. But and then to Gil's question, wouldn't planting raspberry bushes help because they're a woody plant?
But it wouldn't help them in the spring.
Oh, I thought they liked the wood.
Well, but the no-mow is to promote something for them to eat when they come out of hibernation. So it's got to be something that's available. It's their breakfast of the year. It's the right here, right now. So yeah, anything you can plant is going to benefit them. And again, if you have a backyard, a front yard, a side yard, different people have different areas. So it's putting it where it's beneficial, where there will be sun, where there'll be an area for them to go.
And just as a point of clarification, this year we're looking at not changing the ordinance, so everybody would still have to comply with current laws in Cedar Falls. So they could, in other words, they could leave their yard like they left it year-round. It would always be within compliance of the law. So if someone chose to keep their grass at 6 inches, then we as a city have an 8-inch policy. So I think the beauty of this is that it brings awareness to the pollinators, to everything going on, but you still have to comply with city law. So nothing's changing.
And we tell people that lawn grass is not a prairie. Just not mowing your lawn does not make it a prairie. We hear that a lot. I'm just going to let it go to seed. That is not prairie. Prairie is a very specific group of flowers and plants designed as a prairie, not just long grass. So we always like to make that distinction. And we have a lot of information available that if anybody wants, we serve all of Blackhawk County, and they can contact us at any time. We're based here in Waterloo, and they can come and we can give them all sorts of information and to help.
Okay.
Councilman Harding?
Yes.
Another point, I guess, of kind of clarification to make sure I know what I'm thinking I know. It's the flowers that is the reason, right? That's
Flowers, yes.
That's what they're eating.
It's the nectar,
The other
the
thing,
pollen,
yes.
it's the clover. Clover is wonderful. They need something to eat
Yes. Okay.
for that first month until everything else. Once the trees start to bloom, once everything else is in bloom, they have a lot to eat. It's that little area of time when they're the hungriest,
Yes.
the least amount of available options.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. Councilmember
sorry,
Cyrus
Dustin,
first,
go ahead.
and then
I just want to say that last time when we had the no mow May, I've never received so many calls of people so mad and chewed me out, and I never apologized so much because of the fact that I had no idea everybody was just not going to mow. Our town looked bad. Everything looked bad. I have a lot of pride in Cedar Falls. Now, one thing for some of these people that might make them feel better, I sold my horse probably 8 to 9 plus years ago, and I left a big piece of alfalfa. And I've always mowed around that. It's only about 100 by 300, but everybody, since I'm their councilman citywide, they can feel that they're part of that, and I've always had that. This year I am gonna add a hive of bees to it as well. And I just want everybody to know that when I try and pull this out and vote no, it's because of my experience and my promises over the year on the No Mow May, which was kind of a disaster. So I want to thank you for clarifying that you do need to have the flowers, it's not just grass, and all those things you say are what environmentalists like ourselves, believe it or not, even though I'm a Republican, I'm an environmentalist, and I try and look out for those kinds of things, and I've had that patch for all those years just for the pollinators.
And that's exactly what, it can be just that simple as just leaving an area unmown for a month or so, and it's wonderful.
And I want to thank you for your work and coming in to talk to us.
Thank you.
Councilmember Ganfield.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate Mr. Eilers for the education and outreach portion of this. Obviously, with the ordinance not changing or anything, it's a choice for the individual citizen to do something about. I'd like just a little bit of education for myself, since we have your expertise here. We've got sedums in the yard that I see they're already coming out. Is the habitat for the bees and those types of stems going to be disruptive at a certain point, before May, during May? When would be your advice as to when people should start tending to their gardens?
When the new green starts to grow about this tall, that's when you can cut off last year's growth. Anything that has been nesting at that point should be ready to leave. Leave your perennials, if you can, up all winter. Get away from that clearing out everything in the fall and mowing everything down. Leave up as much as you can through the winter, because that's where they're living. And then again, once they're out and about, that's when you can cut off your perennials or even some annuals and start growing them back for this coming year.
Excellent. Thanks.
All right, other questions? All right, looks like that covers it, and we appreciate you.
Thank you.
All right, then next up on the agenda is Finance and Business Operations Committee with a fiscal year 2024 budget, and I'll pass that down to Chair Dunn.
All right, thank you, Councilman Harding. So tonight, we will be going through our budget and working to get to a spot that hopefully we can all agree upon. And we are going to start out with a presentation from Director Rodenbeck.
Sorry, I was just getting organized. Also, I just want to make sure, do we know if Daryl's still?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay, good. Just want to make sure. Okay. So here again tonight to talk about the budget. Tonight, kind of wanted to divide it maybe into a couple sections. First one, just really a reminder where we're at in case someone's tuning in for the first time. Just maybe a reminder where we're at. But then second, talk through, just like Chairperson Dunn just mentioned, is we've heard from council members that an interest in lowering what the proposed amount is. So wanted to talk through what some proposed changes could be and give staff direction to come back with those changes. So again, just want to kind of remind where we're at. So first of all, just want to remind people how their taxes are calculated and who determines that. So there's three pieces to your taxes. It's your valuation of your home, the rollback on that, and then the tax rate you pay. Rollback is set by the state, so the city doesn't have any control over that. So they're setting how much residential homes taxed, how much commercial properties taxed, how much industrial properties taxed. The valuation of your home, whether it's $100,000 or 110 or 150, whatever it is determined by the county, which some of you probably maybe got some letters just this weekend, so maybe a little confusion about that. So valuations are set by the county, again, not in control of the city. And then the third part is the tax rate, which is, of course, what you guys, the city council has control over. So that's the three pieces to that. Just a reminder too that that we had kind of a budget schedule we were trying to get on track on. Unfortunately, with the publication not occurring, we did adjust that. So this, I just put in there kind of where we feel like we're at right now for a schedule. So, tonight, our hope is to, in this committee, talk about potential changes to the budget, Tonight at council, we'll be holding the hearing for the maximum levy dollars. We'll also be setting the hearing for the actual budget adoption. And then on April 17th, we'll actually have that hearing for the budget adoption. Max levy, again, just kind of a reminder, everyone's seen this chart before, so just a reminder that this is the max levy. This was the extra step that was added a few years ago by the state, and the max levy right now, you'll see, shows $10.81. Just a reminder to everybody, last year, the max levy was set at $10.92. By the time we were done with the budget, it went down to $10.76, or the total levy was from $11.67 down to $11.51. So again, this extra step is just setting the max. We can always go down. And a reminder, this doesn't include all of the levies. This is just certain levies that this levy resolution does. So the next thing is in the proposed budget, so what you would have seen in your packet is right now a total rate of $11.74. So again, just a reminder that, so this is going up an increase of 23 cents. But again, it isn't the same as the max levy since there's certain levies that are not included. So if the rate would stay the same, $11.74, as you all know, we always like to tell the whole story. We could sit here and say the rate went up from $11.51 to $11.74, but we do like to tell what that whole story is. So if you had a $100,000 home, you take the rollback that the state said. If the rate was $11.74, the UC residential properties would see an increase of just under 3%, 2.98. Commercial industrial would see 2%, and multi-residential would actually see a large reduction, 12.5%. That is because, again, the rollback for multi-residential, this is the last year that they had that 8-year phase in, so after this year, multi-residential will be the same as regular residential. So that's just kind of a reminder where we're at, and again, that's just what's been published. That's what we've, been proposed in the packet. So that's why I say I want to stop before we move to the second part. So just to let everyone know, we want to recommend to just, for the council, recommend to the council to approve the max levy as published tonight. Reason being is we're trying to stay on course with our schedule and make sure we get it done by April 30th. But we also understand with that, we understand over the next few slides, we're going to talk about some changes, that staff would come back April 17th with those changes incorporated. So that's kind of the first part of our session. So I don't know, Chairperson Dunn, if we want to just talk about that first and get a motion on that to recommend to council. Obviously, the actual vote will be tonight on city council, but it's to do that, and then we can move into the individual motions.
I think that is a good plan, unless someone has a concern about that. So if we could tackle the maximum levy first, that discussion. And I do want to make sure, because I'm saying this to be accountable to everyone, I do intend, and I say this because I apologize the last time I did not allow for public comment on during the committee, and I don't want to do that again. So please help hold me accountable to each time where we have time for public comment. So with that, council, I guess I would like it if we could maybe just start with the motion. We can always have discussion, but if we could.
So motion to recommend to city council the max levy.
Second.
Okay, a motion and second. Any council discussion regarding the motion to recommend the approval of the maximum levy as published, knowing that it can come back? Yes, Councilperson DeBurr.
Well, the largest increase on here is the local emergency management. Are we still working with the other communities toward a more fair resolution rather than having Cedar Falls bear the biggest majority of the expenditure?
Well, I think our concern right now is that I'm not sure what support we're going to get from the other communities to do that. But I think we hear the message loud and clear that we need to work with them about, if nothing else, even if it's not for this year, what are we doing before next year? And we also feel like we can't do that in January and February. We have to start sooner than that to get to that. So, again, the problem with the 2080 agreement is any amendment based on the formula is a simple majority. So we could vote no when that 2080 agreement comes. Other ones could vote no. Other ones could vote no. They could all vote yes, and we're going to be stuck. So it is a tough situation this year. There's no doubt about it. And I think for staff, we feel a little bit like we're not sure what we can do either. But
And as I understood that, that was a vote of the mayors from the communities and also the board of supervisors, or was it just the mayors from the other communities?
so it's the mayors, but I think there is one vote by Blackhawk County. So I don't know how they choose that person. I don't know if it's a particular supervisor who does that. I thought maybe Mayor Green was
It's
here.
the group of supervisors, and then they have one vote.
Oh, okay, all right, okay. I wasn't sure how they did that. Right.
Okay, and as I understood that too, on that vote, then, like, for instance, the community of Waterloo, they got a large reduction while the city of Cedar Falls got a large increase.
Correct. We got a large increase just by changing the formula. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions, concerns regarding the motion that's on the floor for approval of the maximum levy? Yes, Councilman Sires.
I have quite a few. You say we're going to run over the budget points next after this.
Correct.
What is our levy rate to keep a no raise in the taxes towards the our residents? What would
Sure.
that be? Would
So-
that be the 1151?
No, it would actually have to get down to $11.40 to get to a 0% on residential.
Okay. I'd like to make a motion. I move that we bring the max levy rate down to $11.40.
Okay, I gotta step back for a second, because the 1140 would be the total rate. So just as I was talking about, we have a max levy of $10.81, but our total is 1174. So the 1174 would have to get down to the 1140. If you wanna do the max levy at 0%, you'd probably have to subtract 34 cents from $10.81. And again,
And what
once
is
you
that-
do that,
what is that
there's
number?
there's no going up at that point.
I understand.
So if you go from 1081 down, I was looking to see if I had it written down here about the actual max levy. So, but that's what you'd have to do. I'm just saying, because 1174 minus 1140 is 34 cents, so you'd have to take 34 cents from $10.81.
1081 minus 84.
Minus 34 cents. Now, again, part of the reason why, I just want to step back, we all understand that there's an interest to lower our budget. Why staff came tonight about talking about moving ahead with the max levy is, I think our little bit concerned is we're kind of doing all this on the fly and take this and take that, and then if we do it, get all the way down, there's no going back at that point at the next budget. So sometimes that worries me when we're doing that, or when I sit here and say things are like 70,000 and that's worth 3 cents. You have to remember that that's rounding, and
Understand.
So I
The
just want
thing-
to make sure everyone understands
The
that.
thing that concerns me, and I know it isn't going to generate into next year, the first thing that bothers me is the new school tax is going to come this September. Now everybody's just got new assessed values on their properties from our county assessor, and a lot of them have gone up 15 to 17%. So if we look forward to the next year, that's going to be a huge increase if we keep our numbers even close to the same. So I still want a motion that we move our max levy rate to $10.47.
Okay, so we already have a motion on the floor, so it would be a motion to amend, okay. I do, as the chair of this, want to make sure we understand, as Director Rodenbeck has said, that the maximum levy is just that. It's the maximum. So we can always go down, which I think we all are well aware that seems to be the intention of a few folks here, and that's what the next part of the discussion is going to be. We can't go up after we've chose to go down. So and I know I'm not telling anyone
Madam
up here
Chair?
that something they don't know. I'm speaking, thank you. But we cannot, if we set ourselves too low, then we have no wiggle room at all, and we're doing a lot of things on the fly. Where the intent of this discussion tonight and the way it's set up is you set the maximum levy, but then we're going to dive into all the things that have been brought up during discussions, and we can always come down, but we can't go up.
Ms. Chairman?
Yes.
I understand. I want to put the squeeze on, and I want to save these taxpayers money. And that's why I want to knock it down to the 1047. That's all.
I'd like to second that and then have a chance to discuss.
Okay. There is a motion for a amendment to the current motion with a second. And Councilman Sires, go ahead.
I move.
I'm sorry, Councilman Cruz, I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
Sorry, Councilman Cruz, go ahead.
Thank you. Can you hear me well?
Kind of.
Yes.
Kind of. Okay. Director Rodenbeck, can you explain, I'm trying to grasp this idea of the max levy, and then we can't go up, but we can go down. We're going to talk about a dozen or so things to reduce what will become the actual levy, I guess. And once we establish the lower number, say we do get to 1140, doesn't that, in a sense, become the max levy anyway? Because we don't change it until a year from now. Am I thinking this correctly?
So in the maximum levy with the new state edition, it's the maximum levy for just those levies. Library levy is a perfect example. It's a voted on levy. That's not included in the max levy rate, the $10.81, because it was a voted on levy. So I don't disagree. It causes confusion. I mean, when the state did this a few years ago, it causes confusion because you think max levy, that's the maximum it can be. It can't be more than that. True, but only for those certain levies. So it doesn't include everything. So the only thing that we were just worried about is you could say right now, I only want the max levy to be $10.47. But then let's say we go through these next proposed changes and there's things you don't want to get rid of. Then we need to be prepared then for the council tonight not to set your maximum at 1047. You're gonna have to find something else to come up with that. If you don't want to change something that was a $40,000 cut, then we need to talk about what else would be $40,000 cut, which we can do.
Okay, can I expand upon that next question?
Sure.
So this is all talking about the expenditures. Now, I've dug into the revenue side of things, and I look at a couple items that would appear to give us more revenue, whether immediate or not. One in particular is the farm rental, which I know farm rents have dramatically increased over the last couple years, and we should see that increase other than staying level here for many, many years. The other thing I look at is the visitors and tourism. The budget amount was 400,000, but we're projected to collect 808,000. So there's 408,000 of additional revenue that would be factored in these numbers, I would think. So we don't have to cut so drastically in some of this. Am I tracking correctly here?
So I'll start with the farm rental. So actually that it does not affect the general fund, so it would not affect property taxes. The farm rent is the land that when Sartori was sold, the health trust owns, and 2/3 of it is we get lease payments from a renter, 1/3 is from the sewer fund, and we rotate that. So that income, farm rental income is actually going in the hospital fund, not in the general fund. So increasing the revenue doesn't affect the property taxes. It's just, obviously, it's going to help the health trust fund, the hospital fund, which is great, but it would not affect taxes. Hotel motel. So hotel motel taxes, 50% of it goes into the visitor and tourism fund. That's how the resolution, that's when voters did it, that's what we did. So again, that doesn't affect the general fund, that half, because again, that has to go right in the visitors and tourism fund. which is a separate fund. Now, I don't disagree. Like for the current year we're in, we budgeted 400,000. We have been exceptionally happy on the hotel motel tax we've gotten. It's been a good year for travel. For the upcoming year, we've been looking at trying to budget conservatively at 450,000. I understand it would be great and it could be more, but we tend to think, okay, what if it's another pandemic year? I mean, we saw a drastic decrease in fiscal year 21, and we almost had to cut what we, were going to give other folks in terms of grants. So we're trying to be conservative. So I don't disagree. You could raise the revenue there. You could. But I just also want to keep in mind, if it doesn't come in, then that's something that would be, our general fund would be short at that point. But we could. Only half of it, though. The other half.
Ms. Rodenbeck, then, looking at the numbers in our preliminary financial plan, COVID year, starting July 2020, we ended up with 377,000 in hotel motel revenue, which we get half. In fiscal year 22, it went up to 614. Again, that would have started in the July of 21. COVID was still, in many people's minds, still raging, but people are still using the hotel motel. And now we're looking at 808. So we have more hotels online since 2020. And I think we should be able to move our number higher than the 450,000 that's used to project when we're projected to get 808. So I think it'd be, the 408 increase, if we get 204 of that, half of it, we should be able to use 100 of that conservatively, because the previous years have shown, even in the COVID year, we had 377 and we're only projecting 450. So I'm comfortable with pulling in 100,000 of that to help us with getting down to that 1140 number with no increase. We got to pull in more income. We're always talking about the expense side and cutting, but we got to raise our revenue side as well. That's prudent management, cash flow.
Okay, now let's make sure we stay on task. So the current motion is about the maximum levy. We can dive into other things, as we wish, as we go on.
Yep.
So now I'm going to give someone else another chance to speak. Councilwoman DeBurr, please.
Well, I understand you're doing this in two parts, but it seems like it would be best to go through what
And that's
the
fine.
cuts are to see if we want to reduce the maximum by what we all agree should be cut.
That's
Is
fine.
that not
We can do that.
possible, or?
We can do that, but the thought that I have, and maybe I'm the only one sitting up here, is, again, it's the max. We can always work through and make it go down. But if that's the way the council wishes to proceed, so right now we have a motion on the floor. How do we proceed with that, Attorney Rogers?
Don't forget public comment, but there'll be a voice vote on the amendment, and then back to the original motion. As
Do we need to do that now before we move on to or just before we leave each other tonight, we need to?
I think that's what the chairperson's asking, Kevin, is can they just pause right now, I think is what she's asking. There's a motion on the table, can they just pause?
Because I think the vibe I'm getting is we want to go through everything and then go back and talk about the maximum levy.
At the end of the presentation, you want a number for max levy to recommend account. We can sure wait.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Okay. So right now, because we're going to keep diving into everything, is there anyone in the public who wishes to speak at this point regarding what we've discussed so far? Okay. All right. So with that, we'll dive.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I guess I just want to make sure I understand. With an amendment on the table, do we have to do something with that to move on to other discussion?
The reason I asked the question I did is if there were going to be further motions to be made, I would say, yes, we have to dispose of this, but it sounds like this is the one and only thing that we have to decide so we can.
No,
No,
it's
we're going to
not.
have other motions.
Yeah, unfortunately, I believe there will be likely several.
That was the reason for my question.
Sure.
Okay, so now that I have the correct answer, we have to dispose of this motion right now.
Yep. So, Madam Chair,
Yes.
if I may.
Gangfield, yes.
I think, as I think about it, I'm all on board with even the terminology of putting the squeeze on, because when we set a max levy rate that's lower, it says now we have to get to that number or else. And we really would have sold ourselves short or painted ourselves into a corner, whichever analogy you want to use. That's also what gives me a hesitancy here. I don't want to paint ourselves into a corner when we haven't found items that we can either reduce expenditure or increase revenue. I'm curious about the increased revenue potential if we can divert some of those possible incomes, but I also don't want to have a budget shortfall should we not have all that income that we suppose is coming. Either way, I guess the max levy rate isn't threatening. We have said, okay, this is the worst case scenario, and we have essentially a workable budget, and we know what those numbers look like to come from that point down. We don't have a workable budget from the lower number to go up. And I hesitate to think that we have to remove everything because we could get ourselves into a position where we have to start removing necessary expenditures. I don't want our customer service to suffer. I don't want our infrastructure to suffer. So I'm really cautious about lowering it below a feasible number just to strong arm and push a point. So I would be in favor of keeping it and working down from there with the motions to come tonight. That's my sentiment on the motion to amend.
Councilman Harding.
I would echo Councilmember Ganfield's sentiments. We have a workable budget with where everything's at. We already know we're going to come down. If we go to 1047, then and we cut everything that's on the list here, we still wouldn't meet the budget that we would be voting on. So we'd have to dive further in and start to cut other things. And I also echo the sentiment that we can't, while it's nice to increase our revenue, and I want to look at that, you can't rely on that. It's not there. It's not guaranteed. So, so yeah, I'm for publishing where it's at, and then let's bring it down from there.
Yes, Councilman Schultz.
Yeah, absolutely. The point, again, that if we set the 1140, there's no going up. It's either that or lower. And to the points being made that we have a workable budget, based on that, I want to stay with the original.
Okay, any other council points? And we'll do the voice vote for the amendment,
Madam Chair?
excuse me. Yes, Councilman Cruz.
Thank you. So the point of setting the max levy, it's only used momentarily, basically, until we discuss other budget cuts, and then whatever we arrive at then becomes the new max levy for the next year? Or when would we ever go back up to the max levy in the coming year if we do all these cuts?
So April 17th is when is the final hearing for the actual budget. That's what counts. I mean, obviously, the max levy really doesn't count for anything. It's the adopted budget on April 17th that matters. So that's why we were saying, that's why we were just kind of recommending, just stick with the max levy so we can stick on our calendar and make sure we're getting it filed on time. But then after hearing tonight, what possible budget cuts people want to see, we'll come back. Before you approve a rate on April 17th, we'll come back with those cuts in there, the changes, and what your real budget, so to speak, is, with all the levies, all the amounts.
Thank you. Councilman Cyrus, did you want to say anything? I thought you were motioning.
Oh, there's so much for me to say. I'm gonna just cut it short. I can see that the rest of the council doesn't want to go along with me, but the whole thing is, why not set the max levy rate at $15? That way we know we'll be way under that. I'm just trying to set a number where we don't have, I found some things in here. I noticed that we've charged ourselves twice on the 911. We have $500,000 on the fire side, $500,000 on the police side. I had 2 CPAs go over the budget. I'm not quite as smart in numbers as they are. I'm more of the ball player and not the scorekeeper. So I'll have a bunch of stuff. You guys vote on the motion. You can't offend me. You guys know that. So whatever you vote will be fine with me, and you know how my vote will go.
Okay, all right. So with that, unless there's further comments, we will do the voice vote for the current amendment, which was the motion to recommend the City Council to approve the maximum levy as published, with the amendment of setting the amendment at, what number did you say?
1047.
1047.
So point of clarity.
Yes.
We're just voting on the amendment.
Just on the
Just on
amendment
the
right now.
amendment
We are
right now,
only
to
voting
lower
on
it.
the amendment, which is to bring it down to $10.47.
Correct.
Any questions or concerns?
So we're voting on that number before we even talk about how we'd get there.
we are
Right.
voting on the amendment.
That Dave's
Right.
amendment.
Dave's amendment, yeah.
Yes, yes. All right, voice vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay?
Nay.
Nay.
Okay, so the amendment fails, so we are back to the original motion, which is to recommend to the city, recommend approval of the maximum levy as published, knowing that we're going to continue this discussion. Any further questions or concerns about setting the maximum levy or the referral, or I'm sorry, the motion on the floor? Okay, and that also is a voice vote. So all in favor of recommending approval of the maximum levy as published, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Nay.
Okay, do we need did you get that, Madam Clerk?
6-1.
Okay. Okay, now we'll move on to the next portion.
Okay, so in the presentation, we did have proposed budget cuts. We heard from some people about some things, so we have those listed on here. I have at your desk too, actually the bigger sheet, so it was just easier to see than trying to see these little numbers up on the screen. So the sheet's in front of you. What we thought we would do is just kind of go through each one. Some of them are combined because they kind of relate together. So we just thought we would go through them and take a motion on each one, so we clearly know which ones we want to move ahead with, give staff direction. And then at the end, a couple things. We actually have a place where I had any other motions. This, this could be where Councilmember Cruz wants to bring up about raising the revenue by $100,000 to help offset that. That would be something we could talk about then. And then at the very end, we could kind of have a summary of maybe where we're at. But so just kind of going through some. So I'll just pick the first one. And the first ones are probably maybe pretty easy ones, maybe not, might be discussion, but so a couple of suggestions we had was, well, maybe I should step back a year ago. A year ago in this process, we talked about taking money that was in the budget and actually reducing that amount for the single-family housing conversion program. So we had $100,000 last year in the FY23 budget. We left 30 in and then took 70,000 and held it over basically for FY22 to help with that. So what we have is in here, and this is why we kind of put these first couple together because we thought they kind of related to each other, was a motion to take 15,000 of the carryover that we haven't spent in FY23, 70,000 of the carryover from FY22 that we haven't spent either, and use that for the FY24 amount. So it would be still having the program, but use amounts from carryover to reduce that. So we thought those kind of went together. So for each one too, I tried to summarize. So that would be reducing 85,000, that's approximately 4 cents on the rate. So that's maybe a starting point for a motion. If
Motion to
people want-
approve.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, motion and second. Any council discussion? Any public discussion on this motion? Okay, bring it back to council. Nope. Okay, so let's do voice vote on this motion. So the motion is to use the $15,000 of the housing conversion carryover from fiscal year 23 and 70,000 from housing conversion carryover from fiscal year 22 towards the fiscal year 24 housing conversion amount. All in favor of that? Aye.
Aye.
And all opposed, nay. Okay.
And do you want me to just keep moving?
Yep,
Sheriff?
let's just
Okay.
keep on moving.
Okay, so the next one is just slightly different, but it has to do with housing conversion program. It would be to not even budget the full amount for the housing conversion program. We haven't had a whole lot of interest in the program. We've had some, had a few every year, but so the question came up is, do we just not even want to do the full program for FY24? So we could take 75,000 and use it for other things in the budget that would help reduce the rate. So again, slightly different. This is really voting now to really reduce the program. in FY '24.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Second.
Question?
Yes, Councilman
Not
Harding.
that this applies to it. Is there a slide for this one?
Oh,
It's still on.
Sorry.
I just wanted,
Sorry.
because it keeps flashing on the TV, I wanted it to
sure.
make sure
No,
that,
thank you for that.
people saw. No conversation from me on it, though. Thank you.
Okay, I have a question. And I guess it's more just a reassurance to myself that, and maybe to help also the public if there's any questions. You know, if we removed with, you know, if we didn't proceed with the housing conversion program, it doesn't necessarily, future councils, or, you know, this can always come back.
Correct. Yep.
Okay, okay.
Yep.
All right,
And-
any,
And my understanding is,
Question?
I think community development, I think they're kind of prepared to be able to tell people, hey, if they get interest, hey, we're not sure if we're gonna have funding, but, you know, kind of like, we'll keep your name and future, you know, we'll let you know. So I think they're prepared for that.
right, okay.
I have a question.
Yes, Councilman Cruz?
So reading the footnote, we are leaving one $5,000 payment for one property that could have still applied. Is that what I see?
Right, we actually, I double checked with community development. So what happens is they get a payment up front of 5,000, and then when they're done, they get another 5,000. So that's why we were reserving that other 5,000. So that, we didn't want to use too much, and then we didn't have it for the second payment. So,
Is there something out there that's waiting for a second payment right now?
yes, there is.
Okay, thank you.
Any further, yes,
I
Councilman?
just have a quick question for Ms. Rodenbeck. So going back to the first two items, adding up to 85,000 and collectively 4 cents down, and this is 75,000, it's also 4 cents. Is it a rounding
Right, because
thing
we're
that-
taking, you have to remember, we're dividing that by like almost $1 billion in valuation, so.
So you can't
So
get
it's like
farther
4
down.
point, you know, it's gonna be like 4 point, whatever. That's what always makes me worried. That's what I was talking about earlier, when we talk about reducing things by so many cents. I mean, I will be the first to admit, and these are things I don't like either, if you added all these cents up on this chart, it's not exactly the difference between 1174 and 1146. I think it's 1 cent off because
Yeah.
of that whole rounding thing. So, and you know, I don't like that either, but I get it. But that's why it's approximately, that's why I
That was
say
just
that.
a question for clarification, so, thank you.
Any other further council comments? All right, any comments from the public regarding this item? All right, seeing none. So the current motion on the floor is to not proceed with the full housing conversion program for fiscal year '24 and use $75,000 for other general fund projects. We'll do a voice vote. All in favor of this motion, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay.
Okay, remember to change my screen. I gotta remember that this time. So, okay. So moving on to the next one. We're kind of moving on to strategic plan now. So again, a year ago, when we talked about reserving some monies from the housing conversion, we had the same conversation about zoning. We had some dollars left over, 90,000 that we were gonna budget, and we reduced the amount, and let's use some carryover that wasn't spent in FY '22. Those amounts have still not been spent. So what we looked at is, we already had, when we had the CIP discussion, we were gonna do 75,000 in FY '24, so that extra 15,000 of the 90,000 that we were reserving for zoning carryover, we thought we really could just use that for the strategic plan. And just stepping back is, people may think, well, why wouldn't you just do that? I just wanna make sure it is a policy decision in terms of, I didn't want someone a year from now going, whoa, didn't we reserve some zoning dollars, and what happened to those zoning dollars? So that's why we wanted to make it clear that we were really shifting that, so to speak, from zoning to performing the strategic plan. So this motion is still to do the strategic plan in FY '24, but we would use that zoning carryover to fund it instead of new dollars.
Motioned to use the 12.5.
Second.
Motion and second. Any council discussion regarding
Madam
this
Chair.
item? Yes, Councilman Cruz.
Director Rodebeck, can you explain on the footnote I'm seeing it says already used the 75,000 for zoning, but we agreed that that's going to be for the strategic plan and not for zoning, if I understand correctly?
No, you may recall in the CIP discussion, we had the discussion where we were gonna budget 25,000 each year for the zoning line item and use 50,000 in FY '24 and '25 for ordinance updates or changes or whatever word you wanna use. So that's what I was saying, of the 90 we held over, 75, which was on the CIP, would be used, and then there's still 15,000 that could be used towards the strategic plan.
Right, but the zoning updates, we tabled that and weren't going to do that. We voted on that and talked about that at goal setting. So there'd be 50,000 there that could be additionally reduced.
True, we could have the discussion again. I was just basing on the CIP discussion, because in the CIP, we decided that line item, we were gonna do that. Have 75 and 24 and 25, and then 25 for the future year. So I was just basing on that. But you're right, you could change this and make a new motion, amendment, whatever, to not doing the zoning updates either.
Well, I'd like to make a motion that we do not use the 50,000 for zoning in fiscal year '24.
An amendment? Is that what you're making?
Yes, make a motion to amend.
Would that maybe be more proper at the end?
Yeah, where we add extra?
Yeah. So
We could, I mean, yeah, if we wanna do an extra one at the end and just proceed ahead with this one, either one. I mean, he could withdraw
Let me
his
skip this
amendment,
one, you're
yes.
saying? Is that what you're saying? We're skipping this one then?
We were just saying, Councilman Cruz, that if you just wanna, kinda take back, so to speak, your amendment, at the end, when we're talking about additional ones, maybe we can kinda get through each one on our chart, and then we could come back to your zoning question of 50,000 at the end, under additional cuts.
Well, we're going to take a voice vote to allocate 75, but I'm amending it to reduce that. So we would skip this discussion and move on to the next item. If that's what you want to do. Otherwise, we can tackle it right now.
We're talking
way.
about 12.5 carryover. We're
Right,
not talking about 75
Right,
or
we're only
50.
talking about the 15,000, so to speak.
Okay, very good.
Okay.
Thanks, Simon. A little
Okay.
clarity there.
All right. Any other further comments from council on the motion to use $12,500 of zoning carryover from fiscal year '22 to fund the strategic plan for fiscal year '24? And I apologize, did I ask anyone from the public? Anyone have any comments? Okay. All right, with that, we'll do a voice vote on this motion. So all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, nay. Okay, motion carries.
Okay, second one. This is, again, about the strategic plan, but again, it's a little different. It's kind of like the housing conversion. We heard some discussion about, well, maybe we don't even want to do the strategic plan in FY '24. So that's what this one's for, is the same thing. Instead of using the zoning carryover for the strategic plan, we don't do the strategic plan. You're basically using the zoning carryover for other things in the general fund. So that, again, this one's a little different because it would be delaying that strategic plan, or we had talked about that in the past. There's sometimes been private funding for that, or, you know, maybe you and I has donated the consulting work, or whatever it is. I mean, that could be the other option is, hey, we want to do it, but we're only going to do it if we can find in-kind donations or private donations or whatever. And if we can't, then we wouldn't do it. We would delay it to FY '25. So that's really what this motion is. So again, it's a little different than the one before.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion and second. Any council discussion on this item?
Madam Chair,
Yes, Councilman Ganfield.
I think I hesitate on this one. We did have some private firms that stepped up and did some assessments that we're expecting the results from very soon, and I think having a strategic plan as a result would be very helpful to the city, so I hesitate to remove that funding, and in as much as it's only a 1 cent reduction, I don't think we should take that one out. Personally, I would like to leave it in.
Any other further council discussion regarding this matter?
Madam Chair, I would
Yes,
tend to agree with Mr. Ganfield on that comment.
Okay.
There's other ways we can cut.
Okay. Yes, Councilman Schultz?
I'd like to ask Mr. Gaines a question. Based on what we know, what some of the private things have done, how is the timing on that, and would that actually impact us this year?
So I'm assuming you're talking about the housing needs assessment?
Yes.
So my understanding is the schedule is they're looking at coming to council sometime in May for a presentation on the housing needs assessment. So when you figure this building or this budget doesn't start until July 1 of this year, so that would be the timing of when anything would be incorporated in the strategic plan for the upcoming year. So
Any certain strategies that would be beneficial to the city for us to keep this in based on the information that we're anticipating getting in May?
So I think there's a lot of information, and I think as you and Councilman Canfield know, you've sat on a number of those committees, and so it's what within the housing needs assessment will the council adopt or maybe choose not to. And so I think some of those strategies it's hard to say.
Then I am with Mr. Ganfield, or who are you?
Yeah, that's the
Yes, on keeping this in.
Okay, Councilwoman DeBerr, did you have?
I just had a question, is when was the last one done? And how often do we normally do them?
If I remember correctly, I think the last one was completed in 2016.
Yes.
All right.
Correct. And how often do we normally do them?
Years before that, they were done about every 5 years. So if you were working on the 2015, you were working on the 2025 plan. So if you were in 2010, you were really working on the 2020 plan.
They just changed the names of it several times, didn't they?
Typically just the year.
Madam
Okay.
Chair?
Yes, actually, Councilman Cruz, I'll come back. I'm gonna ask the public real quick if there's anyone who would like to comment on this item, anyone that would like to comment on this item from the public. Okay, seeing none, Councilman Cruz.
So this is the Cedar Falls 2025 plan that we want to bring forward to Cedar Falls 2030. It's not the comprehensive plan, which was last done in 2012.
Correct.
Mr. Gaines, is that correct? Okay. Okay, thank you.
Any further council questions, concerns on this item? All right, so with that, we'll do the voice vote for the motion to delay the strategic plan or try and find private or grant funding to fund the strategic plan in fiscal year 24. All in favor of that motion, say aye.
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 All opposed, nay.
Nay.
You got that, Madam Clerk? 2-5 fails. Okay. All right, we'll move on to the next one.
Okay. We're going to be kind of getting into some staffing positions now. So the first one was not a new position that was budgeted for FY24. It's been a position we've had in for a few years, and it's to add a vacant part-time building inspector. So it's been in the budget. It has not been filled just because of the way our building permits have gone. And so we have been talking about that is a position we could remove from the budget. Now, in saying that, we also talked kind of hand in hand. If you go down a few, we also talked about in the building department, though, adding a part-time code enforcement officer. So we really, from a staff, would like to see one or the other cut, not both of them cut. So, but either way, but I just wanted, why we have them separate is this one was already in the budget. Like last year, we just haven't filled it yet. So it wasn't an ask. So that's what this one is for.
Madam Chair, would move to remove that item from the 24 budget.
Okay, move, or
Second.
motion?
Second, and then I have a
Motion
question.
Second, yes, Councilwoman DeBerr.
Since it was already in the budget previously, is there money savings that we could apply somewhere?
Well, no, because as you know, in the general fund, we don't really carry it over unless the council specifically does that, like the resolution at the end of the year. You know, otherwise it'll go to like our general fund savings, that type of thing. So we haven't carried this one over.
Okay, so the money that was budgeted would have gone to general savings?
Correct.
And we can pull that out if we so choose?
We could, yeah.
Director Rodenbeck? I have a question because I feel like, is this the instance where we've discussed that not having this position filled actually costing the city more money by?
I think that's going to be the property acquisition
Okay,
specialist. we're
okay,
gonna
I'm
get to,
sorry.
I
I
think,
just,
that you're
okay,
thinking of.
all right. That was my question. Any other further council questions or conversation on this? Yes, Councilman Ganfield.
I guess a question for Mrs. Rodenbeck on the potential for moving that general savings over even early. I know we talk about at the end of the budget year, moving it by resolution. Is there a potential for another item? If we presuppose that we're going to have some general fund savings in the budget, could we not earmark some of that to offset this year's tax bill?
Sure, we could.
So we could have that option as the 48,000
We could.
sits.
Yep.
Okay, that is good to know. And then in addition, I think this is one we've been trying to hire, and it's the market that's dictating this vacancy, correct?
Well, our building permits haven't been as high as they have been a few years ago. And so for us, I think we weren't sure we had the need for it. It's been in there, but as building permits have declined, we didn't feel like we should hire another one. So that's why
haven't
this
been-
is still vacant.
we
We haven't
haven't been
tried to
actively recruiting it.
advertise. I don't think we have, no.
Well, I'd long for the day when we start getting some building permits again, but
Yeah.
at this time, I think we'll be okay removing it.
And that's the same thing we talked about, is that, obviously if building permits would really go up again in the next year or two, obviously this would probably be a position we would come back and talk about again and request.
Is this reflective of our zoning issues that we go back and forth on? Oh, sorry, out of order.
Director Rodenbeck, I want to make sure I heard, I think you mentioned that staff was, mention of not doing away with there's two items on here.
The part-time code enforcement.
Okay,
We'll get to
okay.
that. It's in the
Yes.
same division building. I think they're just concerned about if we get rid of one and then not add the other one, they have some concerns about that because we know we have some code enforcement work that needs to be done.
All right, I just want to make sure I asterisked the right one. Okay. Any concerns or questions from the public? Any further council questions or concerns on this item? Okay, so with that, we'll do a voice vote on the motion, which is to remove from fiscal year 24 budget the vacant part-time building inspector position. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Okay,
Okay, so the next few are, again, all staffing, but a little different because these were actually additional asks for FY '24. So these haven't been budgeted before. They're in the proposed budget that we did because we talked about them at goal setting, but these are additional asks. So when we talked about things that we could reduce, one of the first things we looked at, of course, is what was the additional things we were going to add. So one of them, and like I said, we have kind of a few of them. They're no particular order. They're just kind of in the middle because we heard mixed kind of from people about these, so that's why they're kind of in the middle of the chart. So the first one is to remove in the 24 budget the additional staffing request in the rec division to move a part-time position to full-time.
okay.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Okay, motion second. Council discussion on this item?
Madam Chair.
Yes, Councilman Ganfield.
Mrs. Rodenbeck, could you remind me what this position's job descriptions are in addition?
Sure,
Or what the
sorry.
addition's going to add?
It's a fitness coordinator that we have right now that's part-time. I don't know, Stephanie, if you have anything you want to add to that, or?
So this position oversees a number of fitness instructors and scheduling classes, finding new classes to offer, creating some of the interest in being at the rec in the first place. So due to the demands of that position, we feel that it's something to consider.
I know this value is a substantial hit in the budget, but I think in a year where we all need to focus a little bit on wellness, I'd rather leave it and see where else we could get some income. That's my 2 cents.
Any other council comments? Yes, Councilwoman DeBer.
This is not losing a person, it's simply just not making them full-time.
Correct.
So are they a 32 or 28-hour employee?
29-hour
29 hour.
employee.
The most expensive hours in the week, those last 9.
Any comments from the public on this item? Okay, I'm going to bring it back. I'm going to make a comment. I don't think it's any secret that I support staff, and I surely support wellness and quality of life in Cedar Falls. The fact that this has been asked, I don't favor pulling that from the budget. So there's my 2 cents. Anything else that council members would like to comment on this item?
I guess I'd say one thing. I would support leaving this in as well. It's a good thing. I worry that since it's requested and the position is already 29 hours, that the person, you know, there's always the chance of the person saying, well, it's not full time and moving on to something else, and then we're out of that position. So I know that the rec center's just growing and people are really focusing on wellness now. So I'd support leaving it in.
Any other comments from council? Okay, so the motion on the floor is to remove from the fiscal year 24 budget the additional staffing request in Recreation Division for a part-time position to move to a full-time position. We'll do a voice vote. All in favor of this, please say aye.
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 All opposed, please say nay.
Nay.
Got it?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
So motion failed.
Motion failed.
3-4?
Yes. Okay, motion fails, so we will
So that one will stay in.
move on, yes.
Okay, so the next one, again, just keeping on with staffing requests. The library did ask for an additional full-time library assistant position, so that was why this is being added and is a request.
All right,
Motion to remove.
motion, second, okay, motion
Question.
second, yes, Councilman Harding.
Is there word on how director of the library has seen this? Or, I mean, obviously they need more staff and we get it. So what's the update
Sure.
is the long and short of it.
Kelly's here if you want to hear.
Yes,
Kelly?
of course,
Okay.
yay.
Kelly Stern, Library Director. First of all, thank you for the difficult work that you do. I don't envy your job. We don't ask for anything that we don't really need, but I know it's difficult to see that from the outside if you're not there every day. So I gathered some data that might help you to make your decision. I went back to January of 2023, and I looked at the date of every resignation and the start date of the next person. And I did that from January of 2020 through the end of March. And this is what I found. There were 23 resignations from the library during that period. 22 of the 23 were part-time, which tells me something. Then I looked at, after I plotted all of the vacancies from the time somebody left until the time somebody started, and I counted up the weeks and divided by 4 to get the number of months. 17.5 out of the 38 months during that period, we had 1 vacancy. 9 months out of that 38, we had 2 concurrent vacancies. 6 months out of that 38, we had 3 vacancies. 3.5 months out of the 38, we had 4 vacancies. 2 months out of 38, we had no vacancies, and those were January and February of 2020. So we have been perpetually understaffed since 2020. Now, I didn't include in this little look, didn't include any sick leave or vacation time that staff took. It doesn't include 7 staff members who took FEMLA leave during that period. Most of them were the full 12 weeks. So that's another 3 months that we were down, 7 staff members. And then I looked at how much of our time as managers, there are 3 of us at the library, how much time we spend hiring people. So it usually takes an hour or 2 to review applications, depending on how many we get. Conservatively, though, I use 90 minutes to make my estimate. Usually takes about 5 hours to do interviews, including follow-up conversation by the managers. That's also a conservative estimate. So I multiplied this by the number of vacancies we have and ended up with, just looking at resumes and doing interviews, we spend 6% of our work time doing that. If we include training time, it goes up to about 15% of our time, and that's a lot of time to spend hiring people. So the library's open 64 hours a week, and we're open weekends year-round except for holidays. So again, I would go back to, we don't ask for what we don't need. We've been understaffed for a while, and it's taking a toll on staff. But it's also, as you can see from having 23 resignations, 22 of which are part-time, we're making it really difficult for people to build a career out of library work. So I would just ask you to consider this information as you make your decisions. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, Director Stern. Any further council comments at this time? Yes, Councilman Harding.
We use the library all the time at my family. Not just books. We rented a mobile hotspot when we went on vacation, so we didn't have to use our cell data, which was really nice because it helped save us money. And we got service when our cell phones didn't get service. That being said, it really boils down to the part-time versus full-time. It's really hard to keep part-time employees because there's no benefits and there's no, so, you know, as much as we're looking to cut, I think we could cut other places. The library is something that you never realize how much you need it and how much you want it until it's gone. So, and we have a great library here. So I'm in full support of keeping this one.
Yes, Councilman Schultz. Councilwoman DeBeer.
Oh, just, Kelly, I don't know what the requirements are for hiring for a library assistant. Would any of the part-time people who left have been qualified to been able to have made them the full-time library assistant, to have kept them? I just want to make sure that if we're looking at part-time, it's whether those people who left would have been able to have been.
Yes, they would have been.
Yeah, before you go,
Yes.
Kelly, I've been oddly doing some reading recently regarding the kind of the I shouldn't say abandonment of librarians, but it seems like nationally at our universities and in our cities, those are being displaced and really not being supported. And at this point, we're talking in this 15 minutes or 10 minutes ago of adding 40 and then now maybe adding 60, and now we're back to $100,000. That's where it's gonna, I really need to challenge myself on how we're going to accomplish our budget goal here, our levy goal. So what is your take on that as well? I certainly appreciate all your statistics of the part-time, but do you see that in the industry, that we're taking for granted our librarians and our libraries?
I can only speak for us. I can't speak for librarians nationwide. I know from the groups I belong to online that some of them are leaving for other reasons, pressure by censors, and some are actually getting threatened and so forth. So there are a number of reasons that people would leave the profession. What I'm seeing, based on the interviews that we do, every single time we do an interview for a part-time position, the first question they ask when it's their turn to ask questions is, could this become full-time? And that tells me something. I don't know, did I answer your question? I'm
Well,
not
I think
sure if
both of us are just having a conversation probably more than anything else, so, but yeah, thank you for all the information you provided.
Any other questions?
I have a follow-up question for Jennifer. Could you explain the library levy and the influence that has on this?
So when we talk about the $11.74 rate versus the maximum levy, like I said, one of those is the 27-cent library levy. That was voted on by the voters when we built the new library, so about '04, I want to say, in there. And so what the levy does is it helps support the library operation. So it's not, in our total levy, we have our $8.10 levy, which is our general fund. That's what mainly supports, parks and police and fire, those operations. So by having the 27-cent levy, we don't have to support the library as much out of the $8.10 levy because it's its own. But it strictly has to go towards the library. I mean, it was voted on, has to go to library use. So they use about, I'm going to use kind of round numbers, half for materials. That's where their materials budget comes out of, is their library levy amount, which is about a like the library levy itself generates about 500 and some thousand. So about half of that goes to the materials. So that's, again, stuff we wouldn't have to purchase out of the $8.10. Then there's other half that goes for whether it's staff who are checking out books, doing that, you know, anything that we can relate to the materials. So we use the levy to help offset those costs.
Is there a sunset on that, or?
Nope, nope. And it's 27 cents, so it never changes. It's always 27 cents.
Okay, I'm
Madam
gonna
Chair?
take a minute, Councilman Cruz, I'm gonna take a minute and just make sure I do my, my job and ask the public if they have any comment on this item. Okay, seeing none, Councilman Cruz, go ahead.
Thank you. Director Rodenbeck, you know, we talk about the library levy 27 cents, and then we're hearing valuation increases. Every day I get a call or a text complaining, concerned about it. When does that actually kick in to reflect on the actual payments? It kicks in, my understanding, fiscal year 25, but the first payment that they see an increase is September 2024?
Correct. So I think you're talking about like this letter that people got in the mail probably,
yeah.
or similar letter about it?
Yeah.
Yes. So that would be, so you've heard me talk before that assessment years or revaluations are the odd years. So FY '24 wasn't a year that we had an across-the-board assessment, reassessment. FY '25 is that year, which is those letters that people got. If you read at the bottom, I highlighted it, says right in there that, you know, this is for 2023 assessment, which is for your tax bill beginning in '24 through 2025. So those changes on valuations won't occur until FY '25. So they don't have an impact on the FY '24 budget.
Okay, a follow-up question, if I may. The library levy of 27 cents then will automatically increase when the valuations increase, correct? And it's not changeable?
Yes
Without a
and no.
referendum?
Here's why I'm going to tell you yes and no. Yes, it says 27 cents. You're right, it doesn't change. Here's what does change, though, the state rollback factor. So tax rates are on the taxable value. So if assessments go up, but in FY '25, the state reduces, let's say, the commercial rollback from 90 to 80, it reduces residential rollback from 54 to 49, then that would not go up. So you have to remember kind of all those parts, you know, like we talked about earlier. It's the rollback, it's the valuation, it's the tax rate. So we know with the library levy, tax rate's always gonna be the same, 27 cents. We see the county is talking about raising valuations, but we don't know yet and won't know till, well, this year, we didn't know until January, what that rollback factor would be from the state. So it might not increase. It depends what the rollback does.
All right, any other questions or comments from the council on this item? All right, so we'll move on with the voice vote. The motion on the floor is to remove from the fiscal year '24 budget the additional staffing request from the library division for a full-time library assistant. We'll do a voice vote. All in favor of this motion, please say aye.
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 All opposed, please say nay. Nay. Do we need to raise a hand?
I think it fails 3-4.
I thought that's right.
How about raise of hands? So all in favor that said aye, please raise your hand.
And I think
Aye.
Darrell did, yeah.
Okay, and then all opposed? Okay. So motion fails. So we'll move on to the next one, Jen.
Sure. So we are at vehicle maintenance. This is from a part-time position to full-time, so similar to one we talked about earlier. You might want to just, you know, I had that little note in there that vehicle maintenance is an internal service fund at the city. So if you reduce something in vehicle maintenance, we have costs in vehicle maintenance, and then they get charged out to all the funds: sewer, refuse, police, fire, parks, all of those. So when you reduce something in vehicle maintenance, about half affects the general fund. The other half would affect street, sewer, refuse. So that's why, in terms of what actually affects the tax rate, it's only half of it. So that's why when we talked about another one before, looked like it was a lot more. Well, that's why. It's only half. So that's why this is only $16,000.
Okay, Council questions, concerns on this item? Actually, no, I'm
Motion to
sorry. We
approve.
should start with the motion. I apologize.
Second.
Okay, motion and second. Now, council questions and concerns.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Councilman Cruz.
I had a chance to talk with Public Works, and similar to what's been said in some of these other positions, they're having a really hard time maintaining part-time people. They have openings for part-time people that are not getting filled. And I think maintaining our streets and everything that Public Works does, the vehicles, there's 400 pieces of equipment that they got to maintain and take care of, and particularly summertime is hard on a lot of that equipment with the mowing and so on. So I'm in favor of putting this in and not removing this cost
All right,
to
thank
help
you.
the Public Works as they desired. Thank you.
Thank
Madam
you.
Chair.
Yes, Councilman Sires.
Do we have somebody here from Public Works who would like to speak on that?
Chase, Dustin, either one?
I guess I can start and Dustin can fill in. But Daryl's correct. We've had to have difficulties filling part-time positions, especially in the mechanics role over the years. The rest of our mechanics are all full-time. This would be the last remaining one. I know in recent years we've had to spend a lot more time down at the transfer station with some of that equipment. And this position would allow some of that work to take place and preventive maintenance. So I guess if Dustin has anything else, he can come up.
Council, thank you. So yeah, this position, like Chase said, will be our last permanent part-time position. They do very critical work. They're kind of our eyes to see, things that break down or, that we need to kind of look at first. And like Chase said, keeping staff is hard to do. Our current employee is a very good employee, and we hope to retain him, but this vote could affect that.
Dustin,
Yes, Councilman Schultz.
just for clarification, what do you mean by your last part-time? This is the only part-time person you have, the rest are full-time?
That's correct, yes. Yep.
Okay.
For mechanics.
For mechanics, yes, sorry.
I'm sorry,
In my
my
section.
clarification too, for
Yep.
mechanics. Yep.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Councilman Sires.
Dustin, don't you find it a little bit hard to pull a guy who's just working a half a day or whatever he works when he gets on a project and he doesn't have the time to help complete it? Is that a problem or not?
Correct, yes. It's scheduling around that. He works Monday through Wednesday full days, and then Thursday is, we call it half day. So we really do have to kind of work around that to make sure that, yeah, he's getting something done. It's not in the middle, and having the extra day and a half would really help us a lot. Like Chase said, down at the transfer station and using other things. A lot of times we're pulling full-time mechanics to do preventative maintenance work. This would help alleviate that.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Just one comment from me, because I do remember a few weeks ago we had a presentation from staff from Public Works about if they could have anything. I think it was a wish of anything they could have, and I think the comment from the staff member, who I think we all appreciate very much, was staff and equipment. So this would cover both of that. Any other, any public comments at this time? Any other council comments? Okay, so the motion on the floor is to remove from the fiscal year 24 budget the additional staffing request in the vehicle maintenance division for a part-time position to move to a full-time. So we'll do a voice vote. All those in favor of removing, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay.
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 Motion does not carry. We'll move on to the next item.
Okay, property acquisition specialist. This is the one you were talking about or asking about earlier, Councilperson Dunn. So we currently contract out our property acquisition. So this is right-of-way, easements, all of that. We used to have an in-house person years ago. So as a staff person, or as a staff request, we talked about this because we know we end up paying more in the long run by contracting out than if we had someone in-house. But we also understand, we are contracting it out right now. So, but we also know that there's sometimes difficulties with that. Sometimes when you contract that out, people still want to talk to somebody at the city. We still have a lot of oversight by Kevin in the, attorney's office, oversight by people in engineering or planning. So that's why this one's kind of difficult, because it would, in the long run, probably be cheaper to have an in-house person. But again, we are currently contracting out, and we charge that to the project costs.
All right. Thank you, Director Rodenbeck. Any motion, I guess, is what we're looking for on this item.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion and second on this item. Council comments or concerns? Yes, Councilman Harding.
This is something I would definitely like to see in the future. I think it'd be wise. It saves a lot right now. Definitely a position that we need to keep an eye on and a tab on, but I think maybe this year let's push it. There are some other positions I think are more in need, so I'm for pushing this one down the road a little bit.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions from council? Yes, Councilman Schultz.
Yeah, that is, I know it's a very important part of our overall property acquisition, and it costs us time and money to contract this out, and still we're relying on staff for expertise. So, there's a lot of hidden costs on this one, but when we are talking about, all right, let's get down to a zero, and now in the out of the past 4 out of the 5 discussions that we just had, we decided to keep. So it's making our overall a lot more difficult. So in hesitance, I would say this would be one that I would continue to push down the road, but very important that next year we really put a emphasis on it.
Yes, Councilwoman DeBur.
By putting the cost onto the project, depending on what the funding source is for that project, helps us actually reduce the tax burden on that, doesn't it?
Right. The complicating part is, let's say we don't have projects. I mean, I know we got lots of projects going on right now, but let's say we don't have a project. If we don't have a project to charge it to, the only other place to charge it to is the general fund. And so that's why we kind of see this as, I guess, maybe the worst case scenario. That's why we put it all in the general fund, because if you don't have projects, that's where it would all be charged. But you're right, in a given year, maybe none of it's charged to general fund because we could go charge it to a project, but we don't have any guarantees. The problem with property acquisition is, it can kind of ebb and flow a little bit.
But with all the street projects that we have, we know that we're going to have it, so we are putting it on the project, which is already done, for example, on Main Street.
Sure. Now, I think we already contract with someone. Have we already? Yeah. The Main Street's all done, right?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
So the property acquisition's already done with that project. But you're right, we have other projects on the CIP too. And maybe, when we talk about next year, maybe we want to come back and we could talk about next year, whether it's in goal setting or whatever, what do we see as the projects it could do and be charged to the projects? If we wanted to talk about it next year, we could do that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yes, Councilman Cruz, please.
Cruz. So Director Rodenbeck, you said if we hire one in-house, it'll be cheaper for us. Wouldn't that be reflective of a net gain instead of a cost of 4 cents?
Well, except, like I said, in theory, yes, but right now, when we contract out, it gets charged to a project. If it's in-house and we don't have a project to charge it to, it's coming out of the general fund. So that's why we see it as an add to the general fund, because it's not budgeted in there. I mean, well, it's in what we're proposing, but I mean, it wasn't in the current year's budget.
You can't allocate it to any project. Okay. So then if there's no project, what will they be doing to keep busy, for lack of a better way to say it?
And I think that's our concern. We understand property acquisition ebbs and flows. We understand that. That was the concern when we had an in-house person. Now, we also understand, as we talk about, strategic plan and a lot of that stuff, we know there's probably work that could be done in planning or engineering elsewhere too. But yes, that is a concern. That's the problem sometimes with the property acquisition specialist.
So this person would be qualified to do other engineering items, I'm assuming, cross-trained of some sort, or?
Well, I think we could in planning, engineering, wherever it seems to fit the best.
Okay. Well, I guess looking at no valuation, or excuse me, no revenue increase from valuations until next year, I'd be in favor of postponing this,
Sure.
like others have said.
Yes, Councilwoman DeBerg.
Just one last question. We've been contracting this out since the person who did it retired, haven't we?
Correct.
Yeah, I thought so. Thanks.
I'm going to make a comment. Again, I just, when we talk about saving money, I just don't understand you're spending more money than you would if you had it in-house. I understand all the conversation that's going on now. I also, as a part of a team in my day job, understand how stressful sometimes having something outsourced can be to the team. And so those things are very much a part of the decisions I make, especially when it comes to staffing. Anyway, that's just my 2 cents. Any other comments or questions from council? And did I ask from the public? Okay, all right, we're all good. Let's move on to the motion. So the motion is to remove from fiscal year 24 budget the additional staffing request in the legal division for a full-time property acquisition specialist. I will do a voice vote. So all in favor of this removal, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Nay. Motion carries.
Okay, all right. Okay, so this is the one we mentioned earlier about the part-time code enforcement that we had talked about, from a staff perspective. If we remove the building inspector position, we would like to keep in the part-time code enforcement. We know there continues to be code enforcement activity. I think the trouble with code enforcement is they can kind of get bogged down with a lot of enforcement, a lot of follow-up, and then, there's more that come in. So that's why this request was made.
Thank you, Director Rodenbeck. Looking for a motion? Okay, motion. Do we have a second?
Just as a question, if there's no motion or no second, then the item is just kept.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, so we have a motion. Anyone have a second?
Second.
Okay, motion and second. Council discussion on this item.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Councilman Ganfield.
I would advocate for leaving this one in there. I've seen firsthand the busyness that's there, and we are coming into a season where this is going to be in high demand yet again. So I would prefer that we leave this one in there and support that department a little bit better.
All right, thank you. Any other council comments, questions, concerns regarding this item?
Madam Chair.
Yes, Councilman Cruz.
I agree with Dustin there. I just wanted to second it to get some discussion if there's any opinions out there. It's the only reason I did a second.
All right, thank you. Anyone from the public wish to speak on this item? All right, seeing none. Any further council discussion? All right, we will move forward to the vote, voice vote for the motion to remove from the fiscal year 24 budget the additional staffing request in the building division for a part-time code enforcement officer. All in favor of that removal, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say nay. Nay.
Nay.
So that motion does not, or fails. It fails.
Okay, I think we got one more before we want to talk about some of those additional ones. So public safety officer, during goal setting, there was discussion about the K-9 program. With that program, we have in there then for the addition of a public safety officer for that program. So you can see that the public safety officer with the K-9 would be $115,000 that was getting added to the FY24 budget. So.
All right. Do we have a motion on this item?
A motion.
All right. Motion to remove for the fiscal year 24 budget the additional staffing request for public safety officer and the K-9 program. Is there a second on that item?
Second.
Motion and second. Council discussion on this. I'll say something. I have reached out because I need to be educated from our professionals in the public safety department. And I want to make sure, again, because I typically support the professional opinion of our staff. I respect and listen to that. This one, though, however, with all the things going on in this budget and this discussion tonight, this one is one that I actually am not in favor of having in the budget. So I just want to make sure that it's, in a perfect world, I would have approved the budget the way it was. But we're in this discussion, and I just want to make sure I put that out there. Any other council comments? Yes, Councilman Schultz.
So, Director Rodenbeck, I've been trying to keep score here,
Okay,
and I think you've been trying to keep
Yep.
score also.
I've been trying.
So, are we at 15 cents, or?
So I have 4, 8, 9, 11, 15. Yep, so it'd be 15 cents right now of things taken out.
So that makes us what, at 11:59?
So yeah, so you'd have the 11.74. Yep, minus the 15 cents is where we would be at right now. Now, I understand there could be other motions that people are going to make, but yeah.
Okay.
Councilman Harding?
Yes. Can I ask Police Chief Howard a question? How you doing? Good. So, I just wanted to see, I know I've actually talked with a number of people about this and requests. Just want to get your thoughts. Is this something you guys, program you want to go ahead with, or?
Yeah, the K-9 program's something I've been wanting for a long time. It's been approached to the director level several times over the past years. And in this last year, Director Birdie was willing to hear what we had to say, and absolutely, we believe we need it. I could sit up here and give you incidents just from the past 6-7 months where we've needed a search K-9 for searching for people, where we've had to call other agencies. It'd be nice for us to kind of join that group where we're being called upon also, being able to utilize our dogs for ourselves, plus other agencies.
Okay, thank you.
I got a question.
What can I do, Councilwoman DeVere, first, please?
Just real quick. The K-9 program, of course, is near and dear to me, as my parents had donated their property for the training at the Woodbury County K-9 Corps for them. Where would you be doing the training for our dog?
We haven't looked into it yet because I wanted this to pass first. I didn't want to get hopes up. There's a lot of people on our department that are looking forward to this. So we'll form a committee and move forward pretty rapidly on it, either up in probably northeast Michigan, or the Iowa State Patrol has approached us about their program. So it just kind of depends on where we go once it's approved, if it's approved.
Councilman Sires?
Is that also going to be a drug sniffing dog?
Yes.
Shouldn't we vote on these two together, the dog and the PSO person?
Please.
We are.
Well, it shows it as two separate ones on my page unless I can't read.
The motion is
The
public
motion
safety
says
officer.
additional staffing position PSO, is all it says.
This is the motion, right here. The motion on the floor is for public safety and K-9.
Okay. My question is, you need another PSO person. We couldn't have a volunteer who was a police officer and save that $100,000? Or we could use it off as the fire station people to come in with the dog. It has to have that.
Yeah, I'd rather the dog be out on the street with the officer.
Okay. And what breed of dog are we going to get? I push for the Malinois or the German Shepherd, of course.
I would have no idea at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Councilman Ganfield.
Yeah. I want to play a little coy in a second with you, Dave, so pay attention. But I just want to support our men and women here, our servants that are seeing a lot of value add from this potential. Like Chief has already said, there's excitement around this. It adds a lot to our community, not just the cost of the officers and the reduction in safety vulnerabilities during traffic stops or other reasons we need to use them. There's some morale boost that comes with this as well. So I'm in favor of keeping it. So Dave, correct me if I'm wrong, Councilman Sires, did you offer to chip in on a dog at one point in time?
I did, but I got to pick the dog and everything else, and that's the whole story. See, they're going to pick some petable something or other, and yeah, no, I was not gonna, and I wanted to have the stainless steel teeth in him too.
Gotcha.
So, yeah. If I got to pick the dog, I'd chip in, believe me.
All right.
All right, Councilman Schultz.
When would, I've seen a lot of stores open in downtown Cedar Falls. I haven't seen the police dog store open. So you're not gonna just start spending this money tomorrow. We can't, if we say go, it's gonna take a while for this all to kick in, right?
I would guess a fall.
So, is that the consideration, Director Rodenbeck, of this 115,000?
So this would be for a full year, but what I want to just remind everybody though is this doesn't actually include the actual cost of the dog. Because we thought originally that might come out of the current year budget. This was for the 12,000 on your chart, was just kind of the annual cost for vet and food and all that stuff. So I get your point. Couldn't we budget for half a year? We could, but we're also going to have to add on 20, 30,000, whatever cost of a dog is, too. Because if we got the full amount, we had talked about, would we use some from this? Now, we could, at the end of the year, reserve some. I understand we could do that. So, I mean, if you're wanting to propose only half a year, I mean, we could cut this in half, but then keep in mind we'd want to do something at the end of year about reserving things for the cost of the. Do I have that all right, Bertie?
Yeah, and I have something I could add there too. That $12,000 cost for the dog, obviously it'll cost more than $12,000 to buy a dog. We want to buy 2 dogs, and so we would plan on using a good portion of our training and travel money for that fiscal year, then to get those dogs and those officers trained up. So it would be a significant event, a significant training event for our organization, whichever year we do it. And so that cost is much more than the 12,000, but we don't need that as an ad. We'll just cut other places internally to make that training a priority.
If we got 2 dogs, I'd say that we name one Davy and the other Goliath.
Fair enough.
Okay, any other questions or concerns from council?
I do have a couple questions.
All right, Councilman Cedar.
It's for either one of you. So we wouldn't actually need our extra PSO until we got dogs. Is that true? Or are you going to hire them right now? Because that could be pushed into next year, the 100,000.
Well, if the PSO was approved, you know, I envision that would be somebody that we'd hire, probably send to an August police academy. And then some current staff would be the 2 officers who then are in charge of the dogs, who get the dogs.
That's what I thought, because I've actually, believe it or not, I've talked to some police officers, and I'm not talking just when I'm getting a speeding ticket, and they were kind of excited and wanted to volunteer to be that dog person, and they are already on staff. I'd like to see them get the first chance as opposed to hiring somebody to do that.
Absolutely. Part of the thought with the hiring is, when you have a dog, there's a continued training regimen weekly that's going to take hours away from patrol. So really the added PSO is to make the K-9 program possible. It also gets into some of our community engagement activities, because if you get dogs, a big piece of what they're going to do is community engagement activities. And so, but what we do is, just like Chief Howard said, have a competitive process for who would be our K-9 handlers, and then those 2 officers would go off to, generally they meet the dog when they're purchased, spend, around 2 months with the dog, month and a half to 2 months, and then bring the dog home. So.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to take a minute here and just make sure I check with the public here, and I'll come back to Councilman Cruz. Anyone from the public wish to speak on this item? All right, seeing none, Councilman Cruz.
Thank you. To Bertie or Howard, in the past, you said we shared dogs with the county or this other cities around us that have the dogs. I'm told that there's different types of dogs for different purposes, and then what will our dogs be trained for? And then if we have these dogs and we share them with other jurisdictions, do we get revenue off of that to help pay for the program? Or are we paying when we share a dog from Waterloo or Blackhawk County or the sheriffs, or how's that work?
I can answer part of it, and then Chief Howard probably answer better what the dog be used for. So we had dogs in the 80s and the 90s. We had 2 dogs, and we stopped our K-9 program, I would say, in the early 2000s. So since then we've relied on either the Iowa State Patrol or the Blackhawk County Sheriff's Department or Waterloo Police Department for the use of the dog. We do not pay them to use the dog. We share the bomb squad. We work cooperatively with our SWAT teams. We have drug recognition experts at all our agencies that we share. So no, we don't pay them to use the dog, and we wouldn't expect somebody to pay to use our dog. Our handler would go with our K-9, and it would be part of a significant operation if somebody was going to another agency to help.
Okay,
And
as
then,
a follow-up then? Sorry.
Chief
Go
Howard
ahead.
can answer a little better about the type of dog and what we'd want to train him to.
Yeah, so we would like an evidence search and evidence locating dog. My choice is at this time to stay away from apprehension dogs, simply because the startup cost is probably 3 times what a evidence locating and search dog would be. We really want to make it a big part of a PR program for the city. We know how popular they are. To where I'm more comfortable at least starting our program up, staying away from apprehension dogs at this time. Just because of that element, and I don't want to lose the program once it starts because of an accidental bite or something like that. This is important to me that this gets taken off and we rejoin, and Councilman Cruz, what I was referring to is that we rejoin the team that happens, the teamwork that happens throughout the Cedar Valley, where we share resources continually. And none of these agencies hesitate to send us their canines when we request. I just want to join that team that when we're requested, we're on our way when called.
Yes, Councilman Schultz?
Okay, sounds good. Are there by chance safety grants for some of this type of thing out there?
I want to, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but I feel like this is a motion to whether or not to keep it on the budget or not. Obviously, if it stays on the budget, we're going to have further discussion and we can get into the nuts and bolts of all this. So with all due respect, Councilman Cruz, I'd like to try to stay on task. Is there something regarding the motion to remove it, a question or comment regarding that?
Well, a grant does reduce the cost, as stated on here. That would reflect on the budget. So I think
And a
it's,
grant, with all due respect, is it's not a for sure thing. So right now, the discussion is to leave it on the budget or not. Any further questions or concerns from council regarding that motion? Yes, Councilman Schultz.
Just one last point of clarification. You said this would be a dog that would be trained in evidence and in search. Does that mean evidence like looking for a dropped firearm or drugs, and then search would be for a missing person or missing evidence?
Yes.
Is this a duplication of the skills and abilities of the dogs of Waterloo, Blackhawk, State?
I guess I don't know what their dog. I think they've also got apprehension dogs. They've got, but most of them are all. That's a single-purpose dog is what we're asking for. A dual-purpose dog would be an apprehension, also called a bite dog. Also, we want the single-purpose dog. So I suppose it is, but like I said, I really want us to join that team so we can be counted on by these other communities when called. It's been a long time since we've had canines. We're hoping to get 2 of them.
So one last thing, just to have consistency, you would have the 2 dogs that we would get be trained in the same abilities, or is there a benefit to have one dog one way and another?
They'll both have the same qualifications.
Okay.
Okay, further questions, comments regarding the motion on the floor, which is to remove from the fiscal year budget, or fiscal year 24 budget, the additional staffing request for public safety officer and the K-9 program. Any further questions, comments, concerns from council regarding that?
Madam Chair.
Yes, Councilman Ganfield.
Would like a little clarity, I guess, what Councilman Cruz might be asking. Are there grant potentials to offset this cost that you're aware of that we could apply?
Not that I'm aware of. There is for equipment, but I have asked everybody to hold their horses until we get approval from y'all.
Understandable.
I think we got to remember a grant is a one-time cost. This would be an annual cost for those, so. Sure.
Yeah, there is, if I can say, there's also, working out donations, working out. I just don't want to count on that. When talking to other canine handlers, they spend a lot of the time of the year doing fundraising, and they're not on shift. I don't want that. I want us to budget for what we know is necessary. We can work on some of the other stuff. I just don't want it to become so necessary that I lose this person for the street. I want this to be part of our budget, so this is a working person and a working dog.
One last question, please.
Yes, Councilman Sires.
And when that officer is on duty, he will have his dog, correct?
He or she will have their dog, you bet.
Okay, thank you.
All right, further questions and concerns, comments? All right, so vote for the motion to remove from the fiscal year 24 budget the additional staffing request for public safety officer and the K-9 program. All in favor of that removal, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, please say nay.
Nay.
All right, so that motion fails. And next up, looks like we're to the any additional changes in motion slide.
I have one.
Director Rodenbeck, did you have any?
No, I
comments
was
from
just,
that?
I made some notes about some things that came up, about the zoning carryover, the hotel motel tax revenue, general fund savings. So I just made some notes on that, but
Okay,
go ahead.
Councilwoman DeBur?
So you don't need a motion to use the general fund savings of that 48,210 from the vacant position that we never used to be used for tax relief?
Yeah, if you want to, I mean, if you want to make that motion, because then we would know.
Okay,
and
I'd
we
like to
would-
make that motion.
Okay.
Okay. Is there a second on that motion?
There is a second. I might ask for a friendly amendment to increase that number to monies that they might find, but a second for now.
Okay, motion and second.
So, Madam Chair?
Could you repeat what it was, please?
Yeah, a motion is to take the savings and apply it to tax relief.
Right, it was the
Saving
savings, do you mean from all? I was just using the one in particular from the building inspector one that we knew that we didn't use the money from last year, and the money went to general funds.
Right.
Okay, the $48,210. Okay. Did you have any, could you hear that okay, Councilman
Yes.
Cruz?
Madam Chair?
All right, Councilman Ganfield.
So it wouldn't be nebulous, grab everything out of general fund savings, but if we had a pretty, let's say, sure bet on monies that we knew were earmarked in this similar fashion, would you be able to help us offset the current tax year a little bit better than that 48,000? I guess I would like to see if there's others that are top of mind for you. If not, we'll stick to the 48,210.
Sure, I mean, I think the challenge, I mean, well, first of all, we know we do have extra hotel motel tax revenue. I mean, Mr. Cruz already talked about that, but we also know we have other revenues that are lower than what we anticipated to get in. So that's why it's tough to sit here today and say, oh, we have this much. You know, it's tough from that standpoint. Also, I just want to make sure everyone understands that when we do these things and it seems easy and it seems from a general fund savings to help offset property tax relief, you have to remember that's also how we plan to fund some projects in the CIP. So any money that we're taking here means that that could reduce a project in the CIP. So I just don't want to forget that part. So it's hard for me to sit here and say, oh yeah, take 500,000, we have it, when we know we're also designating for some capital projects. Anything you want to add to that? I wasn't sure. Okay.
Yes,
Madam Chair.
Councilman Sires, yes.
I don't want to make an amendment on that per se, but I do have just a few things I'd like to say quickly. Every year we've had a tremendous amount of money left over that we use in the CIP. And I've mentioned that I wanted that money to go back for tax relief, and I think that instead of spending that money on whatever the CIP is, which has usually been laid out before by previous councils, I would absolutely like to see that saved within that same year. I know we ended up, I actually asked for year-to-date expenditures because last year we came up with 2.2 million when at budget setting, we were trying to nickel and dime everything just like we did this year. So with the extra money we spent here and there, when it comes to the end of the year, I'd like CIP spend it for tax relief, and I've said those exact same things. The other thing that I would like to see.
Councilman Sires, I don't mean to get too far away, but we do have a motion on that I think
understand.
we should address. And I don't want to take away,
No, I
but we can
figured
address
I
that.
figured I'd get shut off. I'm trying to save the tax dollars, and I got
Well, I
stuff
will
on
gladly
stuff that
let
I
you
have.
speak.
Also, here's one other thing. Here is.
I'd like to hear him speak, please.
Here's in the fire and police budget, there's $500,000 on both sides
Yep.
for the 911
To
call. Why
equal
is
the-
that?
To equal the 1.2 million that we're having to
Okay, it was
budget for
1.2
EMA.
million? Okay,
Yep.
I had that question. I got a whole
Yep.
bunch of stuff here, but I'll let it go.
Yeah.
Well, right now there's a motion on the table, so typically we take care of the motion. Is there any questions or concerns regarding the motion to take the $48,210 and apply that to tax relief? Any questions or concerns from the council? Any questions or concerns from the public? Okay, so we will handle this in a voice vote. So all in favor of applying the $48,210 that's saved by the removal of the vacant part-time building inspector position and applying that to tax relief, all those in favor of that say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Nay. Okay, any other questions? Councilman Sires, would you like to continue?
I would like to make a motion, please. I would like to make a motion that instead of spending our extra at the end of the year for CIP, that completely goes back within that year for tax cut or tax relief of that year. as I said, I asked for year-to-date. How we come up with these big extra numbers, 2.2 million last year and those kinds of things, I think that that's better spent to keep the tax rate down on citizens, especially since they just got a big increase from our tax adjusters. My motion is to use extra money for tax relief instead of CIP at the end of the year.
All right, there's a motion on the floor, and is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Motion second, council discussion. Yes, Councilman Harding.
Would this be more appropriate for referral to talk about? Because I'd like to see, I think you have a good point of, okay, what can we use the money for? But I don't feel comfortable voting on something that large right now without seeing all of what have we done historically, how has it worked out, how has it worked to our favor, where can we allocate it. Like, for example, this last year, we actually used some of that general savings to go to the pool. We allocated it to go different places. It didn't just all go to one place, and we've tended to talk about it. So I definitely want to talk about it, but I get too nervous making that grand of a motion to just say, oh, we're going to immediately take it and just put it all in general savings. It's too big of a bite of steak for me. I need to chew on that a little bit. So
you want to make a...
So I would say, personally, I would feel more comfortable if we removed the motion and referred it at the end of the meeting to go and talk about what we can do with it, personally.
The only problem with that is it won't work out for this year's budget. And last year, when we thought we were dead broke, we came up with 2.2 million right at the end of the year. All I'm saying is this will go back into the general fund and we can use it for first tax relief. Otherwise, we can use it for CIP or whatever the council decides. But it always has to be up to the council, which is a representative of the citizens. That's all.
But it is. We
Madam
talked
Chair.
about it at the end of the goal setting last year, what to do with all of it. We voted on it. We actually voted to put a bunch of it into the health insurance, and then we voted to put towards the pool. So we, as the council, already spent that money. We already did this.
But they will find more.
Isn't that a good thing?
Yeah, and I get that they'll find
I
more.
understand, but I don't want it locked in just for CIP. I want us to decide what to do with it. That's all I'm saying. If
All
you
right.
guys aren't comfortable with that, that's fine.
Okay. Councilman Schultz?
That's where I want my voice being heard too, that to both of your points, Dave, you got a good point. We have 2.1 million, and to Simon's point, to just jump right at that right now, it's something that we need to look at and figure out in a larger scope and more dissecting of what that means than just right now to vote on that and say, from now on, that's going right to the budget. So I'd be in the camp of Simon to look at this in a larger scope in the future.
Can I maybe make a point too? So one of the things that gets challenging with that motion, at least for this year, really is if you think about the fiscal year we're in, we just finished the second quarter or the third quarter. So we have 25% of our entire budget left, and to try to determine what that is, what the excess would be to put towards this year's budget is really a guessing game at this particular juncture. So if you were going to do that, it may be something where you would lag that almost. So whatever general fund savings you would have for this year, you would apply towards a following year's budget. But for us to try to figure out what this general fund savings would be for this next budget year is pretty challenging.
Ron, would that be better to put a percentage goal on that than a dollar value? Being that it's a moving target from year to year?
We still don't, even if you put that percentage on there, you don't know what that percentage of what. So, because we have to certify, on a typical year, we'll have to certify the budget by April 15th. Now, this year, we get a little bit longer. We have to do it by the end of April.
It's usually March 30th.
Or March 30th, I'm sorry. So here we are, we have an additional 30 days. So we would have a full 25% of a year to try to guess what those are. Now, with regard to what we're doing, this is, the budget was put together this year, what's before you, with the council's policy, financial policy of what to do with those excess funds.
So, yes, one moment. Mayor Green, are you wanting to speak? I'm sorry.
Good evening. Just for the process for tonight, I want to be clear that the purpose of the committees, especially Finance and Business Operations Committee, certainly can make recommendations to the council, but it wouldn't be proper to have a motion for the staff to take an action separate from what I could then possibly veto at the council level as a resolution. So certainly discussion makes sense, but it needs to then come forward to the full council rather than directly to staff. Thanks.
Okay.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Councilman Cruz.
So Mr. Gaines kind of hit the nail on the head there, what I was going to ask, comment, and others have alluded to, that, and Dave is saying that there's always seems to be money left over, and significant amount of money. When we're 3/4 of the way through the year, there's got to be some buckets of money that we know that are going to be surplus. I doubt that we're short on everything, that we'll not have $1 million or whatever we'll have, because we always put a cushion in these numbers. With that comment, I know a lot of this extra money seems to end up in Economic Development Fund, which I think of as kind of use the word slush fund, surplus fund for projects. And the CIP is loaded with projects. So many of those would qualify if we possibly run short and we lower this budget number down, the levy number down, that we save the day with the economic development money that was squirreled away in there. So that was eventually to my point about the hotel motel surplus, that there is a significant amount of money that we can partially allocate into the next year. So we'll come to that when I get a chance. Thank you.
Okay. With all of this discussion.
Chair,
Yes,
can I just
yes,
jump in for a
yes.
second? I just want to make sure everybody understands. When we talked about last year about having this 2.2 million and it comes out of nowhere, I just want to clarify that 600,000 of that was about the backfill. We also had a big grant that we got at COVID public safety grant, or COVID rec, that we went over to the rec fund that you talked about. So I mean, there was a couple things that were a little unusual that we received. So I just want to make sure it's not like we always have 2 million that's left over every year. And it is tough when it's the current year. We don't know for sure. Now, I don't disagree. There's some revenues. We talk about Hotel Melto that's coming in. The only bad part is we receive our property taxes, the biggest amounts, in October and April. We don't know yet what our property taxes we're going to get in April from a collection standpoint. We know what we levied, but we don't know from a collection standpoint. So that's what's always tough, too, to make that decision when we don't even know our biggest revenue in the general fund, what we're going to get yet. So that's what's tough about that.
Question?
Yes, Councilman
This will
Hardy.
be a question for Kevin Rogers. From a standpoint of a motion like this, is that, I mean, I get what we're trying to do, but is that motion legal in a committee meeting to entirely change council policy based off of like something that, I'm just curious, because it seems like it's indirectly related to what we're doing, yet we're making a motion to change policy.
So the policy that's in place that drives this process is something that council decided on. Council can't decide that in this meeting to change that policy. So during the council meeting, it sounds like it'd be a great referral to talk about it sometime down the road. But getting to the budget here, changing policy on what to do with excess funds is improper, I think.
Okay.
Just curious.
you.
Thanks.
All right, so with that, Councilman Sires, would you be comfortable withdrawing your motion and making a possible referral?
Mayor Chair, oh, excuse me.
Yes.
Yeah,
no, right.
Thought you were done. I'd like to just go ahead and vote on it, and we'll see where it stands, that's all. Even though if I may be the only one in the affirmative.
Are we okay doing that?
I just said you weren't okay doing
Yes.
it. But that's,
Okay, then it looks like I'm going to withdraw it.
Okay, sounds good. Yes, Councilwoman DeBur.
Okay, with that being withdrawn, we're about 17 cents that we've taken off. What do we do next? Will we have committee meetings after we set the maximum levy? Will we be having committee meetings to see what else we can chew on?
We can, or if people still have motions tonight, unless people are really anxious, want to pause, we can do that, because yes, we can always go down, even at the hearing. But yeah, we could have a special meeting between now and the 17th to talk about more possibilities. We could do that. Like I said, we'll have to proceed ahead with our publication, but again, you can always go down from the publication, but we'll have to, do the publication just to meet our deadline. So, but yeah, we could have a special meeting between now and April 17th if we want to keep talking about other things. We could do that.
Yes, Councilman Harding.
Yeah, I guess that would be my vote, would be, unless someone has something that they've pulled out of the budget that they say we can definitely take this off, kind of makes me nervous to do more on the fly. If people want to get more out of it, let's schedule another meeting to get more out of it rather than just try to swing at a ball flying at us. So that would be my vote.
Ms. Chairman.
Madam Chair.
Okay, Councilman Sires?
I have one quick thing. Our TIF districts, and I've done some history on them. The one was started out there with Viking Pump, moved across the street because Cedar Falls Utilities bought it with thinking about the future and thinking about having another power plant out there. That's how our TIF districts got started. Many years ago, Mayor Cruz suspended part of the TIF district so that we could bring in those tax revenues to our budget. I can't remember exactly what year it was. I think it was 12 years ago, but I could be wrong. It was a while back, but it was Mayor Cruz. If we run into a problem, because I'm all about keeping taxes down, I don't want to break the backs of the taxpayers when we have the industrial park that looks so great and fantastic, but it's...
Councilman Sires, I don't mean to...
This is just my short part.
But please, I understand.
This is a way to shorten the budget.
But what is your actual item to do? That's, I think, the point of it. I'm not trying to cut you off, but hearing what Councilman Harding just said, it's not that we don't want to hear what you have to say, but doing that on the fly right now, it may be better for this body to consider a special meeting to speak with the exact item and the information we need to possibly make a decision of whether or not to remove something.
Could I please have 1 full minute?
Give him a minute.
I'd like to hear him speak.
I'll time it.
Just 1 minute. Okay. So the state has gone ahead and had sunset clauses, and they're going to make it about 20 years, I believe. So the thing about the taxes in an industrial park is divided into 3 pieces. 1 piece goes to the county, 1 piece goes to the schools, and 1 piece goes to us. The school doesn't get shorter because it's backfilled by the state. So what I'm looking to do is, if we're really short, we could do like Mayor Cruz did and just suspend that for a short time and grab some of that money, and that's just one thing we could look into. Any time left? I'm done. Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Councilman Cruz, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm not in favor of having a special meeting. We're here talking about the budget, and there's 2 items that have been brought up and discussed before. I'd like to make a motion and return to the $50,000 that was allocated to zoning updates. I make a motion that we move that forward another year. The jury is still out on what we want for zoning changes, if we're ready to do any more. We talked about a goal setting to that effect, so I think it's an appropriate time to ask for a second on that.
Second, unless it was already out. Wasn't already out, was it? No.
Correct. So yeah, I think we talked about the other part. So I think what he's saying is not do the 50,000 in FY24, take 50,000 out and use it for other things in the general fund. So I would assume 50,000 would be about it's going to be roughly, 60,000 is roughly 3 cents. So it's going to be somewhere between 2 or 3 cents, I guess. So.
Okay.
So yeah, we can do that.
Motion and second. Any council discussion? And to make sure that I'm understanding the motion and everyone else is, so the motion is to take $50,000 from zoning and remove that for fiscal year 24.
Right. So we would not do that in FY24, and we would use that to help offset other costs in the general fund. Yep.
Okay. A motion second. Any council discussion regarding this item?
So that's going to be, excuse me, Madam Chair.
Yep.
That's going to be worded just like these others, remove 50,000.
Yep.
So if we vote in the
Yep.
affirmative, okay, thank you.
Any public comment on this item? All right, seeing none. Any further council discussion? Hearing none. The motion is to remove the $50,000 budgeted for fiscal year '24 and for zoning from this year's budget. All those in favor of removing, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, please say nay.
Nay.
Fails.
That motion fails.
Can I
Any
just-
other? Yes, Councilman Cruz.
Earlier, I spoke of the hotel motel tax, and Director Rodenbeck explained that half of it is allocated to visitors and tourism. The other half is not. It goes into the general fund, from my understanding.
Correct.
We had allocated in fiscal year '23, it was budgeted at 400,000, projected at 808,000. Even if we got 1/4 of the year left, it's pretty easy to see of the shown surplus in our financial projections here, 408, half of that's 204. I think at a minimum, we can claim 150,000 of that to reduce the property taxes allocated to the general fund. We know that there's more hotels online than there was back in 2020.
Second.
Okay, motion second.
Question.
Yes, Councilman Harding.
Not to be, sorry to cut you off,
That's fine.
Councilmember Cruz. I want to get to the
Yep.
details. So, are his numbers? Is that something? Is that something that we can do, and it's not going to mess up any? If we take that money over, it's not going to shortfall anything or mess anything up.
No, I think we'll be okay. It's just one less thing we probably would have talked about when we came back at the end of the year. So if you want to use 150,000, I think that should be fine. 200,000, I think we can doable. I think that's fine. What I thought maybe Councilmember Cruz was also getting to the second thing is whether he was also wanting to increase for FY '24 what we're estimating for revenue too. But I think he's just talking about the FY '23 carryover right now.
Well,
I think,
actually,
right now, maybe you want to make another motion. I shouldn't have got maybe
Thanks,
too
thanks,
excited.
Director Rodenbeck.
Yeah.
I would like to focus on those separately because one is something we have and the other is something we don't have. So just focusing on the carryover, I'm amenable to changing that number to whatever Director Rodenbeck feels is safe, because I trust where we're at number wise, but I think it's a good option.
So point of order, can we verify the dollar amount and the motion as it stands?
It's 150.
That's
Councilman Cruz said 150, but if we want to talk about 200,000, I think we can do that too.
I want to make sure it's a singular motion that we're talking about,
Okay.
the excess.
The current motion is to move $150,000 from the fiscal year '23 carryover from the hotel motel tax into the general fund. And did I get that correct, Councilman Cruz?
actually, based on what Simon said and Jennifer said, that if we can go to 200,000, I would certainly do that, because we're looking for a reduction in the levy rate. And if the money is there, I see based on the projections that it should be there. It's stated 808,760 over the 400 that was originally projected. So 204 carryover. Let's use 200 if Director Rodenbeck thinks that's.
Could that be a friendly amendment, Mr. Rogers? Or would you rather it be amended?
The amendment can be amended. So we have one more amendment in our pocket we can use to change that to 200.
What, say that? So do we have to
Motion-
do an official
the motion
motion
can
to
be
amend?
The motion
Okay.
to amend can be amended.
So what's the equate to?
Or we can withdraw it and start over.
Councilmember Cruz, would you prefer to withdraw that motion currently?
If it works better, I will withdraw that and make a new motion to allocate 200,000 of the carryover money from fiscal year 23 to 24.
Second.
There you go.
Motion and second. Any council discussion? Councilman Schultz.
Director Rodenbeck, so does that equate to about 10 cents?
Yep.
Our work here's done.
All right, any other further council questions, concerns regarding this motion? Any questions or concerns from the public? Seeing none, we will bring this back to us for a voice vote. So all those in favor of the motion to move the $200,000 from fiscal year 23, the carryover over to fiscal year 24 for the hotel motel tax, say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Okay. Yes.
So in summary, I think, and maybe Gil or Susan can check my math if they're doing it, I think right now what I have is a total of 29 cents of reductions. Is that what Susan and Gil have as well?
I had 27.
I had 15 cents off our chart, 2 cents for the general fund,
That's got the 17.
the 48,000 one, the how much we saved, the general fund savings, and then I also had, why did I have another 2 cents?
Because we tried to do the one and
Oh,
failed.
right, and it failed, sorry.
so
I
that
was
puts
on
us
the
at
50,000 and
27.
it failed, you're right.
27.
So
Which
it would be
puts-
27 cents.
Which puts us approximately 0.56.
So, I'm sorry, did you say what? I'm sorry, 11?
Puts us at about a 0.56.
Right, because we were gonna be at, because we are just at like 1147, which is right on your chart, like you said, the 0.56%. So a half an increase on residential. Actually, commercial would actually see about a 0.5% decrease, so that's where it would be at.
And multi-residential gets a pretty good decrease
Yeah.
of 14,
Yep,
almost 15.
yep.
Madam Chair, wait a minute.
Yes, Councilman Cruz.
So to finish up with the hotel motel and the projections into the future, it was the second component. I'd like to discuss that. Looking at the projections, they're using 450,000, which is below what we actually collected in fiscal year 22, 2 years ago. And it's almost just half of what we've collected for fiscal 23. So I think it'd be appropriate to at least raise that 50,000 to 500,000. That still is below what was collected in 22 and 23, and give us plenty of cushion in case we don't receive it for some reason. But I think that's appropriate, and we can get another couple cents off of that, if I'm not mistaken, on 50.
On 50, yeah, so if you see, yeah, we talked about that earlier, it'd be about 2 cents, yep.
Okay, so I'd like to hear a second on that.
All right, second. So, question.
Yes, Councilman
So,
Hardy.
just point of clarity for everyone and myself, we're just budgeting a higher amount in the revenue collected. Instead of 450, we're moving it up to 500,
Right.
which is fairly safe based off of the last 2 years, or is there concern to move it up?
Well, I think it's fairly safe the last 2 years. I think, for some of us who got caught in the FY '20 was the first time hotel motel probably came in less than what we thought because of the pandemic. And so, we're probably just a little more concerned about how that might happen. But yeah, I think if that's, I don't have any major heartburn, I think is what you're
Okay,
asking.
yeah, just double checking.
I don't have major heartburn on that.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Councilman Ganfield.
just to clarify on that one, I do have a little bit of concern, same as you, a little bit, once bitten, twice shy on the pending recession and how many people are going to be expending in the hotel. But the $50,000 additional there would actually gain us 25 in the general
Correct.
fund for next year, because
Well,
half is already designated to.
Well, I thought what Councilmember Cruz was saying is he's actually saying to budget 100,000 next year and half of it went to the general fund of 50, but maybe we
So
want to
we'd be-
clarify that with him.
We'd be at 550 for hotel motel.
Well, actually, it would be, you have to double it. So we, right now, are budgeting 900,000.
Oh, sorry.
Because it's 450 in the general fund, 450 in visitors and tourism. So I
budget million.
think what he's asking is 1,500,000 in the general fund, 500,000 in hotel motel.
Was that correct, Councilmember Cruz?
I guess, Director Rodenbeck, you said you're budgeting 900, half to visitors and tourism, and 450 is in the column here for budgeted 24.
Right. So,
So
so I think you were talking about budgeting 500,000 in the general
well,
fund.
yeah, but I'm looking at, okay, let me back up then, if I may. fiscal year projected 808, is that the city's portion or is that cut in half?
That's the city's portion, but here's why 200,000 I was okay with, but I wasn't gonna be okay with 400,000. The reason being is you go down and you'll see some other revenue line items in that same column that were 200,000 under on. So
Okay.
that's why I was comfortable with the 200,000, but probably wouldn't have been super comfortable with the 400.
Okay, so then we do have 408,000 more than we had budgeted. So going to 500,000, I feel comfortable with that.
Okay.
Certainly.
Yeah.
That's
fair.
a good number.
Okay.
Okay, so the motion on the floor is to raise the
Revenue by 50,000.
by 50
is what I'm
revenue
hearing. We-
on the
we can reduce
hotel,
property taxes.
motel.
Yeah. So again, about 2 cents, 2.5 cents, somewhere in there.
Okay,
And
any,
that's just us guessing, and that's just trying to go,
Yeah, that's just, yeah.
it's not
It's
a,
projecting. We wouldn't have that in hand, so to speak.
can't feel it.
Right.
We're just guessing.
But, I mean, I'm not disagreeing. I mean, we've had 2 good years, the hope would be, but I think as Councilmember Ganfield, I also don't know from an economy standpoint whether people will be traveling. It's hard to guess how that works.
any questions or concerns on this item from the public? Okay, back to council. Any questions or concerns regarding this motion? All right, so we'll move to a voice vote. All in favor of moving or increasing the projected revenue to $50,000 for the hotel motel tax. All those in favor of that motion say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay.
Nay.
That motion carries. Any further additional changes or motions to this discussion tonight or to the budget for fiscal year 24?
Madam
I
Chair.
have a procedural question,
What?
if I may, for Mr. Rogers or whoever is appropriate.
Okay, go ahead, Councilman Cruz.
So if we find something in the CIP for the April 17th meeting and want to pull it, is that an item we can pull or postpone? Say like sidewalks, construction or something like that, if we find a number in there that we want to move, just grabbing something out of the air. How does that work? Or do we have to have a special committee meeting to do so?
I mean, do you want me to talk financially or legally or?
You can start.
Okay, so from a financial standpoint, the thing that's tough about the CIP right now is if like the sidewalks, I think a lot of them are by bonding, GO funds. So if you reduce something by 50,000 sidewalk project, that's GO, that's not necessarily taking 50,000 off of this year's budget. We bond for those, you know, and we pay for them over 10 years, so that's the challenge of just picking something that's GO and it's that. Now, if there was a general revenue project in there that was for 50,000 and you wanted to take it out for FY24, it would have an impact, financial impact right away in FY24. So I just,
So
there's
that's a
no
good point.
sidewalks for the, he mentioned sidewalks as an example, most of those are by bond funding.
So it has to be GO.
I was
in
just
other
grabbing
words.
something.
Yeah, no, yeah, yep.
Yeah, thanks. I was just curious of the process, you know,
Yep.
if we can find something.
And then Attorney Rogers, did you have input on that question?
So legally, council could always take action like that at the final meeting. But if we're doing stuff on the fly, that's a problem. This budget has to work and it has to be submitted on time. And so that's why the idea, if we want to consider this further, is to have a special meeting so we're square by the time we get to that final hearing on the budget, because we're up against it time-wise.
Thank you, Attorney Rogers. Any further comments, questions, concerns from this council?
Could I further ask then, Mr. Rogers?
Councilman Cruz, one moment, please. I'm sorry. I know you can't see it, but there's other folks motioning. Councilman Harding, can you?
I was just going to say, we got a lot of stuff out. I know we didn't get quite to zero, but we got darn close. And, you know, at this point in time, I'm pretty comfortable with where we're at. I don't feel that we need a special meeting. I feel like we've done a lot of great work. And I'm okay with moving forward with all the motions we said today so that when we come back on the 17th, we have all this reflected and can show what we've accomplished.
And just so to clarify too, we can take everything tonight. That was our plan, bring it back on the 17th, but I also just remind people, you can change something at the hearing too. I don't want anyone to think just because we did these tonight, that's also a done deal on this. You can always go down. Can't go up, but we can go down. So I didn't want people to think by not having a special meeting, they don't have any option to do any other
Yeah,
changes.
I guess I understand that, and I just get nervous making
Yeah,
them on the
I agree.
fly on the very last meeting right there. It's a big
Yeah.
thing for the city to have, oh, we messed up the budget because we amended it on the fly in the last meeting.
Right. So I think where we ended up was at 11:45, I think. Susan and Gil, check my math on that. Is that where we ended up? I think so. Now again, we will do the actual numbers and all that, but I think that's where we ended up. So that did end up being about 0.5%, still about increase on residential.
Could I
Okay,
follow
yeah.
up on my question?
Yes, go ahead, Councilman Cruz.
Attorney Rogers, when you say on the fly, I mean, the procedure is a majority vote to remove something potentially. I guess I don't consider that on the fly. I guess you're using that word on the fly, but if we see something in the CIP that's a GR, general revenue, and we say, oh, let's pull that out and it's a penny, and maybe your choice of words is, what it is, but how is that on the fly? I mean, it's a deliberation and a vote. That doesn't seem like on the fly.
It is on the fly. Council's always able to amend the proposed budget before it and go down. That's perfectly fine. But depending upon the items that council comes up with, we have to see, what levy, what funds it comes out of, and that's what I mean by on the fly. We'd be trying to do that in real time, considering an amendment. That's why the suggestion was, if we want to consider further cuts, which is perfectly acceptable, we should do it in the meeting ahead of the final budget hearing. That was my only suggestion.
So then the staff could put together the spreadsheet and show details?
Exactly
Basically.
right. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for clarifying.
Yes, Councilman Ganfield.
I'd like to motion to direct staff to incorporate these agreed upon changes into the fiscal year 24 budget for formal adoption at the
Second.
budget hearing.
Second.
Motion and second. Any further council discussion on the motion? Any public comment on the motion? Okay, we'll do a voice vote. So the motion to direct staff to incorporate the agreed upon changes into the fiscal year 24 budget for formal adoption at the budget hearing on April 17th. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. All right, motion carries. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All right, we are adjourned from the committee meeting. We need, I think, about 5 or 10 minutes to turn around for CFU to get us back online for the regular council meeting. Thank you.